Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our Draft 1 Budget Workshop. As a reminder, this is one in a series of 5. All are open to the public, so welcome our community members that are joining us in council chambers this evening, as well as those that are joining us on our YouTube channel tonight. Just a couple housekeeping items. Everyone sitting around here, your microphone should be off unless you need to speak and then turn it on. That is to help cut down on the noise on the YouTube channel from flipping the papers. So as soon as you're finished speaking, just make sure you shut that off. We will hold for those in person any public questions that you have at the end of tonight's meeting. So please make sure that you jot those questions down if you have any. Those joining us via YouTube, please feel free to email all of us at council@harrisburgnc.org if you have any questions on any of the material you hear this evening presented and have questions about the discussions that we are having. We are happy to engage each of you at that time. So with that, I will turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, community. Really excited to get in front of you this evening with our department heads. I know we've done a lot of work to get up to this moment, which Lee will kind of summarize here a little bit later, but this is our opportunity in Draft 1 to really show you not a balanced budget, but a fiscally constrained budget. Everything that we put before you here is paid for. There's nothing that we're proposing for you that you will have to then pare down. But this also just gives us a great opportunity to engage this evening, so to have a good back and forth, not just with me and the council, but with our directors, and really have that roundtable discussion. So we like this informal format, and we're excited to be able to present our first Draft 1 budget. So what will it look like for this evening? Well, I'm currently in the introduction phase here, but then we'll go into kind of our global budgetary impact section, explain kind of what our headwinds, our challenges, all of the things that go into how we craft this initial draft, and then right into our department. So first up in that will be the public works, streets, environmental protection, all of those enterprise funds that fall under John Young, our Director of Public Works. We'll then go into engineering and stormwater, which is kind of a split, one enterprise and one general fund line item there with our town engineer, Devin Houston. Taisha will take us then into human resources, followed by Janet and the town clerk. Communications and Casey will be second to last, with saving the best for last, James in our IT department. And we'll have plenty of time during those sections to kind of pause, interact. We do have prepared presentations, but all of our presentations have stopping points for questions. But if you can't wait till a stopping point, that's fine. Just ask the question and we can answer it right there. I believe our directors will be able to answer anything that you have, but if I need to jump in, or Lee and Brian, and clarify something, we certainly will do that. You just say your name and address for the record. And then we will have an open question comment section at the end, followed by just wrap up and explaining the next steps along the way. So what today is not a final budget. I don't want you to look at this from the community standpoint, the council standpoint, anybody, and say, okay, this is set in stone. This is our starting point. We think it's a very good starting point. However, we don't want you to think that the changes cannot be made. We're also not making a tax recommendation this evening. What today is preliminary budget, maintains all service levels. We're not looking to go backwards on anything. There will be no tax increase recommended this year. This will be the third year of tax rate freeze and or cut. So we're really proud of that, but we are not recommending anything that would require additional revenue. Tonight is an opportunity for us to discuss all the detailed operations and areas that you see that are needed for investment. It will also be an opportunity to discuss any fees for services, et cetera, anything that over the past years you've seen evolve and you want to make comments on. And we will show a one-year operational budget with the CIP attached to that. So council has seen some similar to this as I've given presentations, but I thought it was important before we get started to just kind of talk through how we've built up to this budget and what the significance of this year's budget is compared to others. So I like to start back in 2022 when I became manager, and we had a lot of new faces here around the table. And 2022 was really just all about stabilization. Setting those expectations, starting over. That year we started a sheriff's division, and that was kind of took up a lot of our budget there, but providing public safety. Doing compensation studies and an overhaul of town compensation plan, retaining our employees. That was a volatile time right after COVID where we had, retention bonuses being given out, employees being poached. So we were able to really stabilize and just review everything that first year. We then moved into 2023 and rewrote our entire vision, mission, value, and goals, building a short-term strategic plan. Upon those plans, we built objectives and tasks for us to do and to meet those vision, mission, goals, values. And then we went about just kind of that reputational repair and brand. We were kind of scattered across departments. Some things we did really well, some things we could improve upon. We also didn't have very many good partnerships, and so the mayor, council, manager, we really looked to position ourselves to compete regionally. In order to do that, we had to build capacity. We just didn't have enough staff. And you'll see that in our budget graphs as we look through today, and you kind of look at a 5-year trend. I think you'll see that trend head up in those first few years, and then you're seeing it flatten now. Most of our trends that you look at from last year, this year will either be flat or negative, but they're certainly slowing in pace. We were instructed to kind of build succession and redundancy. We now have assistants in all of our departments, which didn't exist previously, and really enhance and build upon our internal competencies and elevate those expectations. We're also charged with, diversifying revenue through grants and investments, which we've got lots of things on this later to really highlight how successful we've been there, but we have surpassed all of our goals on bringing in revenue that's not property tax in order to keep that property tax at a bare minimum. And that brought us to last year where we had to navigate the reevaluation process, which certainly was the most contentious reevaluation process that I've seen in my career in any location, and was a struggle for many communities. What we brought out of that was a commitment to unanimous agreement. Not everyone was going to get everything they wanted in an environment where you have hyperinflation and things like that going on. But we were committed to securing that long-term funding for the things the community needs, as well as listening to the council, listening to the community, and adjusting as we heard feedback. We built that trust with transparency and education of the public, and we came out of it all the better for that. So last year, very difficult year to navigate, but I think we did as well as anybody in that process to make sure that we're providing the services that our residents want and doing that at a very efficient pace and getting great value for our dollar. The other thing that we put a premium on was building an organization that can really compete at the highest level. That, as we grow, we're one of the fastest growing communities in the state. We are certainly in the region a top growing community and somebody who is pushing the boundaries on some of our programs and services. And so in order to do that, we need to have top talent. And we need to be able to attract new high quality talent as we lose some of the talent that we've trained here that can go on to larger organizations in bigger metros. So we've done that. We've done an excellent job of talent acquisition, and we've also focused on an abundance of high quality communication. So we invested in both of those last year, in talent and communication. And I think we've seen that pay dividends. When we look back at those goals that we set on that second budget, when we did our goals and our mission, vision, values, we set a 5-year plan. So we're on 2 years through that 5-year plan, and we've executed 31 of those 44 goals that were set for us to complete. We still have some of those longer term things to work on, but we're well ahead of pace. We should be at about 18, and we're at 31. So I'm really proud of our staff and council in supporting us and giving us the resources that we need to get those objectives completed. And then the last thing, which kind of is something that brings us into the current year, is beginning a culture of constant process improvement. Those 31 things that we completed, we completed those based on the goals that we set and the standards that we set 2 years ago. Well, those aren't the same standards that we have today. So we're always looking to say, okay, how do we move the ball forward? We're doing really well at our services, but do we buy our own garbage cans and brand them? And can we do that cheaper, better by bringing it in-house? And once we do that, we'll be looking at other ways to bring some of our solid waste things in-house. And we do that in human resource. We do it in communication by constantly looking at our strategies and making sure that we're evolving. So having a culture of constant process improvement has been something new for our group, but I think it's something that really benefits the town in the long run. So this year, what are we doing with our budget? What are we putting in front of you guys? Well, our short-term planning, that 5-year horizon, we're done with that. We have a mission. We have a vision. We know who we are currently. Now we just need to go out and execute. We have our path. We have our resources, and we need to execute at the highest level. We're also starting our long-term planning, that 2045 and beyond, right? What is Harrisburg when we have 40,000 residents, 45,000 residents? How do we continue to have everything that's good about Harrisburg now at a larger scale? How do you scale it up without losing that hometown feel? How do you scale it up without losing the connections and the customer service that we tend to have in a smaller community? Engaging the public more. You know, we've been challenged with engaging the public. We've met the goals that were set a few years ago, but what is the next step? What is the next frontier on engaging the public and getting public feedback and understanding where we're going together? And then focusing on that constant process improvement, making lots of little incremental improvements throughout the organization across 10 departments in order to move everybody forward a little bit, and that moves the entire group forward a lot. So just as a summary sheet, this is something, I mean, the story of Harrisburg is a story of growth. So when we look at where are we at right now, I like to compare two charts here that you see, and on the left is our census data. So in 2020, when we look at the previous 10 years from 2010 to 2020, Harrisburg was the 6th fastest growing community in the state for communities that were over 15,000. So if you get really small and you add, you know, if you're a town of 100 and you add 100, you get 100% growth. That we kind of try to eliminate those kind of boom town that are small. Do you need to take that, Wally? Okay, I'm just playing. I know you'll harass me later, so I got to get mine in right now. In the second graph there, the second one on the right is Harrisburg today. So from 2020 to 2023, what did we see when we look in retrospect? And we all know that we've taken a very active stance here as a town to raise our quality to the highest level that we can. And to do that, we expect to push down the pace of growth and kind of control it a little bit. Well, it turns out, even with doing that, Harrisburg is a very popular place to be. Our population's now 22,500 and growing. We add about 1,200 new residents every year. We expect that to slow down a little bit in these next few years based on the amount of single family that we have built out and the amount versus the amount that we've approved recently. But to date, that's what we're adding, about 100 new residents a month. That small town charm and connection, coupled with that big city convenience that we have by location, drives everybody that's looking in this area. They look at Harrisburg as a top 3 community to move to. That strong sense of community and belonging, our events, everything that we do here adds to our success on our growth picture. And we've done it at the highest level. We are the 4th highest household income in the region, 9th highest in the state of North Carolina. So not only are we growing very quickly, we're growing in quality. And that creates a lot of challenges along with the benefits that come along with that. But if you look at 2020 to 2023, we're no longer sixth in the state. Now we're fourth in that short period of time. By the end of the census, maybe we're back down to sixth, but we have started off this decade outpacing what we did last decade, which was exponential growth year after year. So our themes on how are we going to deal with who we are, what our challenges are. Our goals for FY 2026 and the year coming up are really efficiency. How do we do every little thing incrementally better? How do we execute all the things that we have in front of us, knowing that we've just got a lot going on? Making sure that we pan out that long-term planning so we can couple that with, we know what we're doing in the next 3 to 5 years, but how does that affect what we're going to do in 20 years? Our departments, again, you're going to see their budgets leveling off as we've staffed up and we've gotten the capacities there, we've got the competencies there. You're going to see a lot of leveling off in those arenas. The townwide operational expenditures as a whole are going to look pretty flat at the end of these 2 work sessions that we go. We're only asking for 1.5 full-time equivalents in the entire budget. That is about a 1% increase over our current staffing. So if we're growing at, with that 18%, we're at about 6-7% a year, but we're only really asking to expand our staff about 1%. And a real laser focus on execution and efficiency. We know what we need to do. We know we have the resources to do it, and focusing in on not getting distracted by the things that we are not challenged to do, and focus only on the things that we are challenged to do. We think the things that are going to make it difficult is that growth environment, our residential demand versus the commercial demand. We have a lot of demand for residential. We want a lot of demand for commercial, and we need to flip that a little bit. The inflation, it continues to be a headwind. It has come down quite a bit and is in more reasonable area, but we have seen it tick back up in the last quarter. We're back up to about 3% for the quarter, and we know that the trade disputes are going to add significantly to our budget in material costs if those carry on for anything more than a short period of time. We buy a lot of steel, we buy a lot of aluminum, we buy a lot of vehicles, we buy a lot of material, a lot of pipe in the ground, things like that. So if concrete gets more expensive, we know that those things can be an issue. We've prepared for those things in this budget. If they do not materialize, we'll be better off for it. But ultimately, we need to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. And then the unpredictable outside factors. Healthcare continues to demolish the inflation parameters. We see healthcare pacing, on the low ends at 15%, on the high ends at 22, 23%. That's going to be a challenge for the years to come. Retirement costs, those are kind of just passed down to us, and the state has a different outlook than most states have on how we fund our pensions. The cost of sewer treatment, as we know, we run out of capacity. We've got to share in this expansion. That comes with debt service. That comes with additional treatment cost. It becomes more and more expensive to treat as we scale up. And we couple that with the sewer availability. We only have so much to use, and we have to use it wisely. And that gets us back to that residential versus commercial versus economic development. So these are challenges that we're keeping an eye on, as well as water availability. This has not been an issue for us in the past decade, but you go back just a little bit further than that, a year or two, and we do have seasonal droughts. And if we were to get in a seasonal drought again, we've grown twice as big as we were 12 years ago when we had to have water restrictions. And so with twice as many residents, with twice as many businesses, we are keeping an eye on what do we do in drought conditions? What policies do we have in place? How do we maintain these services? I think we're well positioned as a town, certainly better positioned than most. And we're excited to show you how we're tackling all this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to get into some more kind of details on these. If you have any questions, let us know.
I got one for you, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. It just kind of touch it for a second, but when we finished last year, I think the controversial piece of that whole budget was where did we land on inflation? How close did we get? I mean, I don't know, inflation, our year runs till June, so do we know how close we got on that?
We're, if we talk about the CPI, consumer price index, I mean, that's what, when everybody looks at inflation, they'll do consumer price index. And then it's, do you look at core inflation or general inflation? So it depends on which one of those you're looking at. And they're about a 1% difference if you look at those two. We built in a 4-year inflationary outlook of about 4% per year. Said, okay, that should cover us from an inflationary standpoint. Core inflation has tracked a little bit higher than CPI. CPI is at about 3. So we're, on average, I mean, we don't have a 12-month look back from July. We're going to have to wait till July to get there for that 12-month. But I think we're, and Brian's get hit on this, I think we've got our hands around it. We're probably 1% to the good. And if that continues, then we're all going to be in very good shape. That remains to be seen what that looks like long term. But so far, I don't feel like we are wildly over, but we are under, which is good. Right.
All right, thank you. So I just wanted to quickly go over a couple items that we'd call global budgetary impacts, or things that are going to affect all the departments, so that each department doesn't need to get into those, and we just have an understanding of things that affect all departments across the town. And if you think back to last year, this took about 4 or 5 slides to get through, because we had incredible inflationary pressures on pretty much all of our cost inputs to the budget, from the deputy salary study to our internal salary study to materials for construction to all of our service contracts and professional services. It really felt like it was coming from all angles. And like Rob said, we have our hands around that inflation a little bit more, and we've done some things. We've taken some steps this year to fight that inflation and see what we can do with certain things like multi-year contracts, where we can go ahead and establish those fees for a couple of years and not have that surprise inflationary increase every year when you get a renew. So we've done some things there, and like Rob said, the actual inflation that we're experiencing is more in that 3 to 4 range. One of the big items is health insurance. Over the past 5 years, we've seen estimates in the 15 to 20% range as we are at this time period in the budget, and as we approach adopting the budget. So we always go with the conservative approach of 20%, and we get that estimate from our insurance broker. And that's what we've received again this year as an estimate, is 20%. The impact of a 20% rate increase is about $300,000 across all departments for the town. Hopefully that lands in the 15% range for us based on our claims utilization, which would pull off another 75 or so from that increase. But this is one of the most substantial cost increases that we see each year. The second one, that's another unavoidable cost, is the North Carolina pension system, the retirement system. That has an employer match. The employees contribute 6%, and the employer is set by the General Assembly and the Treasurer's Office. That rate change has increased from 13.6% to 14.35%, so that represents a 5.5% increase. When I got here in 2018, that rate was 7%. So just in a short number of years, they have increased it from 7 up to 14.35. But luckily this year, as far as the increase goes, that is the smallest annual increase at 5.5%. So maybe things are getting better on that front. But that's about an $80,000 overall impact to the town to see that increase there. So inflation is still one of the items that we are focusing on, and doing as much as we can internally to limit that to 4%. So all the budgets were presented this year for management's consideration with a 4% constraint on it, and then we took it from there based on initiatives that we have for each department. Just wanted to let everyone know that the value of 1 penny on the tax rate as you're evaluating some of the things that you see in these budget presentations, and as you evaluate how you want to respond on the revenue side, is up to $480,000 now for each penny on our tax rate. And one of the little efficient things that we're trying to do, or something that you'll see through a couple of departments tonight, is further consolidating of some of our accounts in our general ledger. So if each department has pre-employment expenses, or each department in town hall has a shared expense with printing or postage or something like that, it's worth it to us to consolidate those, show them in one place where it's more efficient to have that. It's easier to track it, analyze it. It just makes more sense to house that in one place. So you'll see various expenses in some departments continue to get shifted over to one place, where it's just a more efficient way to record those and report on those. So you see a little bit of that tonight as well. Also wanted to take a second and just review capital project funds for council and for the public. These differ from the operating funds in that it's a multi-year fund. So once that expenditure is appropriated and approved, it's there until the project is closed out, unlike the annual budget, which has to be reappropriated every year. So we use these for multi-year construction projects or substantial purchases. A substantial purchase in this case is like a fire truck that takes a year, 2 or 3 years to build. So we established the funds for 2 to 5 years on average. And one of the great things that these funds do is they pull the substantial projects out of operations so that you don't distort the operating fund from year to year with such large projects. Our current capital project funds are the general government, which houses the town hall renovation, public safety, transportation, recreation, economic development, which has the train station, the water and sewer fund, and the stormwater fund. And just to illustrate, this is the economic development capital project fund. So as you can see, over this 5-year period, it has the $1.75 million budget, but that doesn't mean that we're going to spend $9 million on the train station. We have 1.75, and it's there until the project is closed out. So as you can see, we had very minor legal cost in 22. 23 had no expenditures at all towards the train station. Again, in 24, very minor legal cost as we worked on a contract. And then very recently this year, we closed on the train station land at $1.39 million. And so you see the expense jumping up in 25, but the overall project has only spent that $1.392 million. And we have a cap of 1.75 across the life of this capital project fund. So these can look a little interesting when you're looking at especially the water sewer or the transportation. Over time, there's a lot of projects layered in there, but it doesn't mean that in any given year you'll spend all of that money. So I just wanted to share that. I'll pass it over to Lee.
Thanks, Brian. I'll go over my one slide. That was as much as I was given this year. So no. Really wanted to get into our time investment in the budget process. Those of you that have been here for a while have seen these, but we always really like to put this out, especially for the public that may be seeing this for the first time. And especially as we go through these budget workshops, we don't get into each individual line item of the budget. So I want to make sure everybody understands and can appreciate and have faith that we've done a lot of diligence as we've gone through. So what you're seeing in these binders and what the department heads will be going through today has been vetted and time has been spent to put them together. And we really feel comfortable that we're presenting you good, fiscally responsible budgets. So we began the budget, and that's myself, Rob, and Brian in October is when we sat down and we really started laying out how the budget process was going to go. We then had all of our departments get together and actually start putting these budgets together. And depending on the size of the department, obviously, anywhere between 20 and over 80 hours were spent individually on these departments. And that's just specifically the department head, the director. A lot of times, obviously, they're pulling in a lot of different people on their staff to help put together the cost estimates and the needs of the department. Just with again, the finance department, Rob and myself, we spend over 200 hours from October through the end of the budget process, which will be in May, hopefully. And that's a lot of time. That 200 is probably pretty light and doesn't include all of our time, but just kind of gives you an idea of the amount of time that we're actually getting in there. We also have had staff meetings, over 50 hours of staff meetings to date. And again, that's the actual meeting time. You would have to multiply that by about 10 directors to get what the total investment of time was. And then council here and the public from here and the budget retreat that we just went through the course of the budget process is another 25 hours of meetings. So again, just wanted to highlight the amount of time and effort that goes into the budget from that October timeframe to the May timeframe. And hopefully everybody has comfort that the numbers they're seeing are good. Any questions I can answer there? With that, we'll turn over to our first department, John Young, our Public Works Director.
All right. If you want to turn to tab 14, we are going to be just kind of trying to signal you guys to make sure you're in the right locations as we go through the night. But tab 14 is where we're going to start with my presentation. And just a really quick aside that I didn't talk about. So I arrived here on November the 12th. The next day, I got an email from Brian that said, hey, your draft budget is due next week. And it was only $20 million. So, you know, hey. But I've told people that several times already. So Public Works, this year, again, we are not requesting any new positions. We are currently trying to focus on filling positions. I think we have 3 vacancies right now. We actually have interviews for one of those positions coming up next week as well. So that's a good thing. As far as our opportunities and obligations, I call them, balance the needs of a growing town. As Rob alluded to, more maintenance for more infrastructure. You know, we've got a lot more infrastructure we're looking after. We have partnerships with internal departments to complete capital projects. Devin and I are working closely together on a lot of our capital projects, and we'll actually go over a few of those here as we go through these slides. Implement strategic plans, new strategies to enhance transparency and customer satisfaction. Another program we're looking at starting is one of our efficiency programs. It's called payment management. Again, we'll talk through that here in a few minutes. We get down to the POW. And then diversify service offerings, looking at more and better maintenance opportunities. How can we get out there and serve the public better? What can we use? How do we use our existing services to do that? And then just to highlight the red is one of our new efficiencies as well. Right now, we're evaluating our fleet assessment program, doing a scoring mechanism. That'll probably be in future capital expenditures, but we're starting it now, and something we'll be looking at for all of our capital, specifically rolling assets in the next future years. Some of our changes to highlight in streets this year. Refinement of the greenway maintenance. I think that was started last year. We've narrowed that down to where we know kind of how much it's going to cost us. Increase utility fees for street lights. That's a continual rate that goes up. And then obviously we're taking on new street lights as well. Addition of new wayfinding signs, replacements and repairs. I think this is something that came out of the council. We are actually going to be getting our signs back up, the old wayfinding signs, replacing them, and then our goal is how can we implement this program throughout the town and making sure we have it addressed on all facets of the town. So we did add some money in there for that. And then, of course, addition of street enhancements. That's another, again, maintenance and repair type thing. We're looking at how can we make the streets of Harrisburg look better, whether that's through landscaping, whatever it happens to be along our corridors. A couple of things we removed was the slurry seal program. That's actually rolling into our pavement management. And then obviously the intersection analysis from last year, which you guys approved at last council meeting. We'll be working through that. A couple of projects I'm going to highlight here. Highway 49 lighting improvements and Woodside Drive street improvements. We'll go through each one of those in a little bit of detail. Highway 49 lighting improvements is going to start. We're actually working with Duke Energy on this since they own all the lights along this corridor. This will be enhancement to pedestrian lighting and street lighting. It starts at the county line and goes all the way to Kings Drive. We're already working with Duke Energy on it. They actually have a lot of our plans. We've given them everything that we have, including the Highway 49 overlay. And they're starting their process of laying out the lights. We're looking at basically when you arrive in the county or when you arrive in the city, you know you're in Harrisburg. It's going to be done in phases. First phase will probably be from the county line to Caldwell Road or potentially Caldwell Road up to like Pepsi or something. That will require an NCDOT permit. It actually has to go to Raleigh to do that. So it'll take a little bit of time, but you'll see this coming across your council agendas here when we get that first phase implemented. This is a new project, Woodside Drive street improvements. This project actually was developed out of some citizen concerns along this corridor. Really the goal of this project is to tie into some of the existing improvements in this area, along with some future projects. Our overall goal is to create some walkability in the area, address some of the existing concerns related to stormwater. You can kind of see our typical cross section there on the left. Got a sidewalk on one side, again, curb and gutter along the corridor, and then of course improvements to storm drainage in that area. So again, just another project that's developed out of some of our citizen concerns in the area, and we'll continue to do this as we move through some of our capital projects. Speaking of capital projects, if you want to hold tab 14, but if you want to turn over to 26, tab 26, that's actually where all of our capital projects exist, from our street department, our transportation really, and these are several of those. These are some of the ones that are, if you remember me talking about working with engineering, these are all ones we're working together on, and some of them are dual projects. For example, the annual ADA program, both engineering and I have pieces of that, or the public works have pieces of that. Some of the programs are completely in engineering right now. For example, the Robinson Church Road roadway improvements or the Harrisburg Rail and Trail and Greenway. All those are in some form or fashion of moving forward, whether it's through contract negotiations or whether it's trying to get proposals approved. And you can see a lot of that in your budget packets. This is a 5-year expense on that transportation. This is what Brian was alluding to earlier. As you can kind of see there, over the last 3 years, really, you see a lot of growth in the transportation capital. A lot of that is related to grant proceeds. Brian and his team did a really good job here showing what grant proceeds have been received by the town, which is outstanding. I mean, over $15 million in those last couple of years that you guys have been able to apply to projects. And then that gap would be what the town has as far as investment on the tax side. So really, really, really good. And a lot of those dollars, you're going to start to see them put into projects as we move along. And then the last thing on streets is this is the streets over 5-year expenses. You can kind of see those trending down a little bit. One of the things that's happened in the streets budget is we pulled all the Greenway projects out and put those into the capital, as you kind of seen those a little bit earlier. So that's one of the reasons for that downtick in streets. Yeah, this is streets back to 14. I apologize. Yep. And we won't jump around like that again. Yeah, we won't jump around. So that's all the streets. So I'll definitely take some questions on the first section there, which again, got several to go through, but that's our streets and with the including transportation capital.
John, real quick question.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize these projects? Is it level of effort, biggest impact, easiest one to do, most money? I mean, and I trust you because somebody's going to say, oh, they paved this street, they never come down my street. What lens do you look at that?
Yeah, so if you're talking about the pavement management, is that what you're talking about?
Well, any improvement.
Any project?
Yeah, any project.
So each one I think is a little bit different on the pavement management side. The goal of that, as far as paving a road, that's what you're going to see in this program that we're going to be starting up. It actually is completely data-based. They score the roads, and then you're going to, wherever it happens to be that needs to be addressed, that's what you're going to see. It's a really good GIS platform that you can look at. Anybody from the public can see it. So that on the pavement management side, which is a yearly program, that'll be really transparent. On the other projects, a lot of those are built around, and Devin will probably talk about this a little bit in his. It's really built around when the money's programmed, from the MPO, it may be programmed in 26 or 28. I don't know the years which you guys have the money programmed. A lot of it's built around when those dollars are programmed in the budget. But in general, I know coming up in your next council meeting, you're going to see a lot of those dollars you're going to start to see starting. But I think we're trying to get as many projects as we can done without. There's a balance in that because you also don't want to affect how people are driving. You want to make sure you got construction and making sure people can do the same things. But no real basis other than when's the money can become available and what's the data telling us where we need to go.
So in the past, we have known a number when we're talking about repaving.
Yep.
So what's the number for like a quarter mile versus half mile? You often get somebody will walk up and go, it's just my street. Well, how long is your street, right? What does that equate to? But what are we looking at today when we're thinking of repaving roads?
You're talking about how much length? Well, what the goal of this program is I'm going to give them a budget. So $750,000, I think $725 is what we're looking at. So the goal is kind of something that, we're going to look at and see what that is. For example, I don't know how much y'all paved in the past. Let's say it's 5 miles. I don't know the answer to that, but say it's 5 miles. The goal is to take that $725,000 and just spread it out as many miles as you can get through not just repaving. And we'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute. I know you've done some slurry seal in some of your subdivisions already, but there are other opportunities out there that you can utilize. But taking that dollar, instead of spending $10 on, putting down a new resurfacing, putting $2 into, hey, I've got a brand new pavement that I can put something on that'll make it last another 5 years. So really, and then instead of having that 5 miles, maybe we can stretch it out to 10 with the $725K. I don't know that there's an actual number. What ultimately you want to do is, y'all, I think there's about 90 miles of street here in the town of Harrisburg that you really want a 20-year cycle of being able to address each portion of that pile of streets. And then, even the new stuff, you have some that you're going to be doing some work on, but you want to take that 90, bless you, and really divide it into that number.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? All right. If you will turn to tab 15, so this is going to be right after tab 14 there. We're going to talk about environmental protection. Some of our opportunities and obligations, as everybody's aware, we're going to be rolling out our new carts hopefully in mid-March. There'll be more to come on that, working with our communications department and, of course, the folks that we're buying the carts from. But you will definitely see a lot of information coming out in the next couple of weeks about that. Obviously, we're going to monitor that program as we roll them out. I'm very excited to get this to happen. The carts are beautiful. Any of you are welcome to come over to Public Works and see them. We actually have one of each over there, and I think Casey's got some pictures as well. And then we're going to evaluate a possibility for internal sanitation services. I think Rob mentioned this a few minutes ago. As we monitor those new carts, is this something we want to take that next step? That's really a longer term thing, but really is going to help us when we get those new carts out. And then increased service delivery. We do have some new equipment this year that you guys approved last year, and we're able to utilize that to get out and do a lot more in our environmental protection. We've got some equipment's really good. I think it's a new leaf truck or new vac truck that we have right now. So we've got 2 fairly new pieces of equipment out there, and the goal is, less breakdowns to make sure that we can utilize those appropriately. Some of the budget changes in environmental protection. Service increase. We did have a new position that you guys approved last year. We are currently, that is one of the positions I was talking about earlier. We're trying to hire that. We have service increase in bulk item collection. One of the things that I learned when I came here is it felt like there was some miscommunication going on in our bulk item collection. We're definitely refining that and try to do a better job working with Waste Pro right now. But ultimately, is this something that we want to step up that program for? So again, some of the things we're looking at doing next year. And then the good thing here is the decreased sanitation service costs. So with the cart implementation, obviously right now we are leasing those carts from Waste Pro. that'll be eliminated in that budget as we move forward with our new carts. And then a quick 5-year expense on environmental protection. Again, you can see that is slightly going down with that decrease in sanitation services for next year that we anticipate with the new cart rollout. And with that, I will take any questions.
So the recurring expense drop because we're not leasing those carts, but we had a capital outlay. And remind me, we did the math on this. When are we back in the black with our capital investment? Is that a 2-year, 3-year?
It's a 3-year, just a little over 3-year.
Okay.
So the savings here, I guess I'm trying to understand where the revenue is in this piece, because we added, a fee, a solid waste collection fee for the residents, and how that affects, the savings here obviously, looks good on paper, but the residents are paying that $10 a month. And when, if ever, does that solid waste fee come off? Does it grow larger if we do solid waste in-house? How are those two numbers compared to each other?
So our analysis on if we do solid waste in-house would be a revenue neutral at a minimum. So we wouldn't want to increase cost significantly, and when I say significant, I mean 1 or 2%, okay, we get better customer service, we can provide it better, you'd go up nominally. Of course, that would come to you guys for that type of decision, but we wouldn't recommend increasing costs significantly to bring it in-house. What we'd be looking at is, can we reduce cost if we were to purchase our own trucks, hire our own employees, pay our own tipping fees, those types of things. And John has a lot of experience in that realm, so that's what he'll be looking at over the next year or so, is what opportunities do we have? Do we is our town built the right way? Do we have the right population? The fee will be one of those things that you're able to analyze annually. Draft 2 is where we kind of have all of our fees and revenues, and we take a look at that, and we can make decisions on fee reductions, eliminations, increases, on all of those things. We don't have that consideration at this meeting, but we have that information available. It's the same as last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's just whatever we had as the revenue in the budget for last year, and I don't.
$840,000.
Okay.
I guess I just want to make sure that the overall zeitgeist of the town's thinking is that, okay, we have a solid waste fee. We have that forever now, right? Like once government implements taxes or fees, it's like, okay, great, we have that forever. But I'd like us to look at it like, okay, if we have savings, then we pass that along to the resident just like we did. We had to add it because of things out of our control. And I just want to make sure that thinking continues. And I know we have done that. I just want to make sure it continues.
Yep. We'll take that note.
Thank you. I forgot. When you mentioned refining the bulk item collection, what does that mean?
So, I did. So when I first got here, there were some issues with how we're getting our work orders. It's nothing to do with customer service, so I'm not blaming Brian. This is related to the process itself. What we're trying to do is refine that process to where everybody understands this is how you do it. This is your time frame to be able to get there. And, if they can't get there and there's a bulk item, we don't want, this happened a couple of weeks ago, actually. We had a citizen that called in. They had missed a bulk item collection our current contractor had, and instead of them having it out in front of their house, we went and took care of it, which we can do. So again, just refining that, making sure that customer service goes up. Yep, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Yeah, are we gonna do that spreadsheet where we show for the next 10 years for capital expenditures, and if we're thinking of bringing it in-house, should that be somewhere at the end of that 10-year plan?
Yes. In your book, we do have the 10-year CIPs. Mm-hmm. We're not recommending this year to bring anything in-house. But I think the reason Ron. Okay, I think the reason John was bringing it up is we're talking about some of our efficiencies and innovations. Mm-hmm. So one of the things he'll be tasked with this year, in addition to doing all of the things that are in the service departments, is also finding time to do that analysis and say, is it cost beneficial to bring this in-house? Do you do it all at once? Maybe we can start doing bulk pickup and then kind of baby step. We don't know what we'll recommend, but we won't recommend anything until that analysis is done. But that analysis will be done in the upcoming budget. Next year's budget, we would anticipate having some recommendations from the work that he does over the next year.
And right now, we're contracted out like 5 years, right? Or 5 years with Harrisburg. Okay. Okay.
Any other? All right, we'll move on. If you'll turn to tab 16, we'll talk through buildings and grounds, one of our smaller departments. So a couple of things here. Continue planning for our expansion in the second floor town hall. I know that process is moving along right now as far as what that's going to look like. Don't know exactly the time frame on that, but want to make sure we're prepared for what that takeover is going to be, because obviously it's a lot of square footage added to our facilities. Evaluate services. So we have started a custodial service here at Town Hall. It does not extend to all the other town facilities right now. We're going to see how that works here in our town hall. Is that something we want to move over into other facilities? Don't know that until we can kind of get an idea. It's really only been going on for 2 months now. And then we have revised the maintenance worker that was here. We've actually revised that job description to really focus more back on what the original goal was of becoming a maintenance worker for all the town facilities. So we actually have interviews on this position. This is one of the 3 that I mentioned, but we have interviews on that coming up next week, and hopefully we'll be able to fill that. That person will be back feeding a little bit on the custodial side, but overall goal is they're true maintenance driven. So excited to have that in place, because I think that's something that's really going to be helpful and going to be effective across all of our town, instead of having some of our employees now that probably are better served going out to fix a water leak or whatever it happens to be, that are wouldn't be doing that maintenance. Some of the budget changes, just a couple of quick ones. Increased supplies in preparation for town hall takeover. There's a little bit more money in there for that. The contracted custodial services in there. And then increased water and electric utilities. This actually harkens back a little bit to what Brian mentioned. You'll see it in this. A lot of those services that were part of our town facilities have now been rolled into buildings and grounds. Is that a consolidated effort? And that's why you're seeing that spike in buildings and grounds over this year, is that consolidation of whatever it happens to be, in this case water, utility bills, and then all the other things that would be associated with buildings and grounds, and that's the spike there. Any questions?
So like, let's say facilities like in the park and such, is that part of this budget? Is it going to be part of that now?
It is not part of that. Parks and Recreation does their facilities within the parks. It is part of, this one actually includes here, our fire department, which we do maintain some of the things in there, not a ton. The fire department does a lot of their own work. Sheriff department, we facilitate things there and fix them. And then of course, Public Works.
So there's no benefit in consolidating any of those bills and such, electricity and whatnot.
As of right now, we feel like it's probably a good idea to keep those under parks, because the idea here was that the Buildings and Grounds Department is handling town hall. The majority of their duties are town hall, and so we were able to pull those expenses from all the departments and represent the town hall maintenance expense. So right now, parks still has it.
Okay, if you'll turn to tab 19, we're going to talk through POW. Pretty short one here. POW bill here, you guys are aware, you utilize most of it for pavement, which is great. That's what it's supposed to be used for. So we do have an increased allocation this year that we're going to be taking advantage of. It's part of our obligations, opportunities, and then the pavement management that I mentioned. I think you're going to really like this program and see what it what it's going to show. It has, like I said, has a really good forward-facing piece to it that council is easy for everybody to digest. Not that it's a hard program, but it helps everybody to look at it and see what's going to happen and where, you know, I live on X Street, when's X Street going to have some work done to it? And we'll be presenting a lot of that once we get the dashboard up and going. It'll probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of July, August timeframe. And then the goal is to implement that with next year's budget. And we were able to utilize some of the existing budget funds from this year to get that going. Just a kind of quick overview of what that looks like. We talked about this a few minutes ago. This is kind of the stress curve for payment management, really what it is. The deterioration curve is really what it is, but the black line represents a typical payment that deteriorates over time. As you can kind of see there, a lot of the life of it is lost in that 10 to 15 year time frame. What our goal is in payment management is to really keep it in that green on the top. There's a lot of variety of ways you can do that. Rejuvenation, crack sealing, microsurfacing, mill and fill. There's some other opportunities. Really, we're going to look at all of them because I know each community has their own preferences. For example, you know, you may not like crack sealing, or, you know, you may not like the way it looks because it's a spider web on the road, but there's opportunities to actually do that in conjunction with other things to where it really is beneficial. So being able to do that and pushing that life out to that 20 plus years is the ultimate goal, because again, there's decreases. There's not going to be any more money in payment management. You know, we're seeing that happen with gas tax changes and things like that. So the goal is using those dollars most effectively, and that's what that'll be. And then a couple of budget changes is just that increased allocation, making sure we're using it for the payment management program and just all across the state. So hopefully across the town, hopefully we can take those 5 miles and stretch them out to 10 or 12 or whatever it happens to be. And you can see that in the Powell bill expenses. That little bit of uptick there is that increased allocation for next year that we're seeing. All right, so that is all of my presentation for non-enterprise. So John, if you got questions.
Two quick questions about the Powell bill, because I don't understand this. That allocation comes from the state, and they have their formula, and they base it on that. Have we traditionally used all the money that was allocated for us? Did we get it all spent?
We do. The past couple of years, every dollar that we received, we spent.
We spent every dollar. Okay.
Yes, but we do have a Powell bill reserve right now from prior years, and it's about $200,000.
Okay.
And then with our distribution next year, we'll be just shy of $1 million.
Is there any way for other communities that don't use their money or don't get it spent to appeal back to the state or say, oh, we were robbed, or we have more, or we want more? Or is there any? There's no. That's it.
It's population and street mileage in your network.
There's no negotiation.
And that's it.
Okay.
So have we, I thought I remember us having conversations where some of these streets that we have taken over, meaning that we're responsible, do we still get Powell bill money on that, or
we do?
Is there any streets that we've lost Powell bill money on?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we tend to just keep expanding kind of our parameter. We like to take care of our roads, right? So, you know, the things that we want to be on brand with the town. Harking back, I think John's dashboard or graph there that shows that the pavement preservation kind of goes back to a question you had earlier, and Chris had it earlier. Yours with the cost of, what does it cost to resurface? And typically, we've kind of thrown those numbers out there. I have no idea what it is today, but it was 100,000 mile, then it was 200,000 mile, and just as the cost of oil changes and the cost of labor changes, that is steadily increased. And it's not as important in this model because we're looking for ways to not have to resurface, right? So if John can find a way on Bloom that was put in 6 years ago to preserve that so that we're not resurfacing it in 10 years, but doing it in 17 years, then that's the win that we're looking for. And having that be a very transparent process to where anybody can go and see where is their road in that system, how is it scored, where does it compare to other roads. I think that's going to be something that's really helpful for everybody.
The ask is that the average user understand what is a state-maintained road. We get more questions with regards to, well, Stallings needs to be repaved. I appreciate it, but you need to talk to NCDOT. That's not us. So in this application that you're talking about, will that delineate those state roads so they understand that those are not covered by city maintenance? Or
That is definitely something we can look into. We did not do that in the program when I was over in Mooresville, but I feel like I could probably implement that. We could have a different color. It's basically a GIS system, but definitely can take a look at that and see.
thank you.
And at what point do you go? I mean, it's not a lot. It's not a lot of money we get from the state, and I don't know how they require that you allocate it. But I do know it's a great time to be a paving contractor. You know, how much is the paving machine, and at what point do you consider bringing that in house, similar to trash, and realizing some cost savings? And would the state even allow you to purchase a machine like that with those funds?
We can both handle it.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in there. So paving is expensive. You know, and again, a lot of your cost is built into the actual cost purchase of the paving itself. I don't know that I've ever been a part of a program or seen one. I don't know if anybody, I don't know who across the state, it probably are, that has some in-house paving services. I'm sure some of your larger municipalities do. But paving equipment is expensive. So, I mean, I guess there's probably a time when you would, you know, maybe get to there, but I don't know that, you know, Harrisburg, where we are, could be in that realm. But I think the other opportunity that we have, which is great in the Charlotte metro area, is we do have a lot of paving contractors. So there's a lot of competition for it as well. So the only thing about that is, you know, if there's a lot going on, it can be a little bit challenging. If there's not, you know, they're looking for something to do. So, you know, I used to always joke about government. You know, government's great when the economy's down because we can spend dollars cheaper than most people can. But I would answer the question to say it'll be a long road before you would get to that, because you still got to buy the pavement. You got to maintain paving equipment, which is extremely expensive to maintain, and then the people. One of the things we had trouble with is just keeping the people that do that kind of stuff on board, and you would have to have a pretty significant amount of those to get any kind of mileage put out. But Rob, I don't know if you want to jump in. You probably have some other.
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little bit more color to that, having worked in multiple states with it. Is the short answer is I don't think we're going to pave in-house, and the long reason for that is labor is pretty cheap in North Carolina. I've actually brought paving in-house in Ohio, but all the labor up there is Teamster Union labor. So, you know, it's kind of an apples to apples government versus private sector. Private sector labor in North Carolina isn't as tightly controlled as government sector labor in North Carolina. So they tend to be able to get labor a little cheaper. The second is if you don't do it every day, you get pretty bad at it. I mean, so I've brought it in-house and gave it up because our guys, even though we could pay them well, they just weren't very good at paving. And it was just for dollar, it's better to hire a contractor, and they would do our town and move on to the next town and move on. And that's all that person did was pave. They never worked on anything else. They woke up, paved, went to bed, woke up, paved, did that for 30 years. So it's a skill. And I don't think we could be cost effective even if we could meet the skill. But those are always analysis we do. I mean, if price went through the roof, we would definitely go, what's a paving machine cost? Could we do little roads? Could we get one small enough to maybe do little patches and things like that? But traditionally, because most of our roads are newer, we don't have as much like full depth repair, small sections to do, which is what that's really good for in-house. But that's about all I can add. But John answered that very well.
Any other questions before I move into water and sewer?
I need to go back up to the beginning of your presentation.
Okay.
This became an issue with previous councils, so I'm just talk about what this looks like on Woodside, because that was a big mess a few while ago. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I challenged,
because I know you're talking about parallel, but that's just right there. So,
so I had challenged John and our engineering department, so Public Works and Engineering, with this is a new project, right? So you haven't seen this on a CIP. And this came from the public feedback that we gotten out there from people saying, look, our road's not wide enough. We got to walk in the middle of the road. We've got people with disabilities out here that take wheelchairs into the road. And, we're talking about interconnecting the town all over the place, and if we're going to have people on this road, it's just not safe. We've talked for several years about where do we start in Old Harrisburg in road upgrades? Where do we have opportunities to do both the storm drains and curb, gutter, sidewalks, pedestrian facilities? So with all that feedback that we've gotten back, with the recent grants that we've gotten, with our small downtown area plan that we're going to be embarking on, this became the logical of, if we're going to upgrade a road and make it right, now's the time to go there. We had talked about parallel in the past. Parallel is very long, right? Yeah, I mean, you could talk little sections, but what makes one section of parallel better than the other? This became the logical starting point for upgrading it to town standards, and that's been a request on all these roads over many years. So our folks were able to take a look at this, come up with some cost estimates, put that in. This will be on your council exercise, and what it'll look like is that cross section on the left where we have a normal 2 10-foot lanes, you have sidewalks, curb, gutter, storms are buried, you don't have those ditches. That way people have somewhere to walk and be off the road and enjoy the neighborhood. And John, not to steal your thunder, which I did, but if you have anything to add to that, who knows? But I didn't want to throw you under the bus since I'm the one that told you to put it together.
He did tell me to put it together. One thing the only thing I would add is, I personally think these are great projects. We did a lot of street improvements in older sections of town in Mooresville, some of the old Mill Village areas. One of the things you can take the opportunity to do when you do these type of projects is you can look at the whole picture of it. Is there a water line needs to be upgraded along this corridor? Is there sewer issues in here? You can go ahead and address those and have it completely taken care of when you go along there. And, again, you have to, kind of like eating an elephant. How do you do that? You take a bite at a time. I mean, it truly is the case when you're doing street improvement projects like this, because they're expensive. And, if you got something you can tie into, kind of like Rob mentioned, is there potential to tie into an existing project along the corridor? Have you done some improvements there, whatever it happens to be? Is there an issue? I don't know, at Woodside Drive, I hadn't been out there to take a look at it. Is there a failure along that corridor that, hey, we're going to have to go in there and do this improvement anyway, or we're going to have to repave this anyway? Let's look at some of the other opportunities. But, I think that's the goal here. Old Harrisburg, as I keep hearing that, Old Harrisburg and the new. Let's enhance it. Let's get people where they can walk. Let's give them the opportunity to do those things. At the same time, let's fix some potential issues, and that's where this developed from.
Does Woodside offer more consistency? I mean, when we think of parallel, the ditch jumps from side to side periodically, so you couldn't consistently have sidewalk here and then jump across the street to the other side.
Yeah. I would answer that to say we typically, when we're doing projects like this, that's what I would do. I like to make it. I like to put it on the right, the appropriate side where you're going to address the most citizens along the corridor, and making sure you hit them. But the other thing you also have to look at is where is it best suited. So Woodside Drive, I don't know what the elevation is out there, and I've been on Woodside. I've tried to drive a lot of towns, but don't have a picture of it in my head. it's one side going downhill to where it would be more advantageous to put the sidewalk on the other side. Parallel, I have been along it a pretty good bit. It does seem there's some, back and forth on there. That could be addressed with some things related to storm drainage and stuff like that. But I think, again, this one was really more about just some of the citizen feedback that Rob had gotten and his team, and then obviously tying into some of the other existing projects that we know are going to happen in the next future.
Prior to most people on this board, I think, Ron, you may have been the only person here, Ian, maybe, we did a stormwater project on Autumn Drive. Mm-hmm. And, that for years before, that was one of the first projects I did when I got here 8 years ago, was go school parallel Autumn, the whole right side of this picture with new storm drainage systems, which has turned out to work even better than we would have hoped. And the thought process with that was that needed to go in before we could kind of go west. And so Autumn Drive, Woodside Drive, Parallel Drive, those were all prohibited from having really any upgrades until that stormwater was in and working well and we could analyze it. And since then, this is now kind of the natural evolution of where do we go next? We either go up Autumn, Woodside, or Parallel based on the citizen feedback, the length of roads, the other projects that we have, some of our plans that we're working on. That's how that kind of jumps to it, and that kind of goes back to your question earlier about our more complex projects and how do we decide which ones do what. And it is a combination. If this was a $10 million project, you couldn't propose it. You don't have the money. We're not willing to do debt service right now. So that brings our top end dollar amount down. Some of it's geometrics. Like John said, this is straight. It flows left to right. You don't have kind of a lot of curving back and forth on the road where you'd have to flip things around. And we already upgraded right next to it, so we can tie the storm in without any problem for that. So a lot of it's just a best fit analysis on all those things, and then ultimately it comes to this board and there's a political appetite for things too, right? I like this, I don't like that. I'd like to think 95% of what we do is engineering and staff driven, but certainly the last 5% is does the board support it?
All right, let me get through here really quick. I'll probably go too far.
She had to make you go back to the first slide,
fine.
right?
It's fine. Perfectly fine. That's all right. All right, so we're going, if you'll turn to tab 29, that's where we're going to be starting on water and sewer. Big themes here before I even get started. No new people, but increased cost. We do, and Rob mentioned this a little bit earlier as far as our our sewer treatment and water purchase costs. That's going to be reflected in here pretty heavily. So opportunities and obligations, balance increased sewer treatment and water purchase costs with our other service opportunities. Obviously, we want to still maintain doing stuff, even though we know it costs a little bit more to do these other things, because that's what happens with growth. We continue to develop our relationships with partner agencies. We're still looking at other opportunities for long-term water supply needs with Charlotte Water and Concord. Continuing implementation of capital improvement projects while planning for future growth. We're wrapping up our Black and Veatch study. We actually reviewed the final draft on that 2 weeks ago, I believe, and hope to have the final project list in before too long. And we'll be able to implement some of those in upcoming budget years. And then preparing for water quality regulations. So we had some of that last year, and then we've got some additional ones we already know about. They're upcoming in 27, but we actually have to be ready and actually start doing those before that time. So and those are going to cost money. So that'll be reflected in this budget, is reflected actually. Some of the budget changes: increased sewer treatment cost, increased water purchase cost. We reduced our new meter budget by a little bit. One thing I'll share there is you guys have done a great job of implementing your new meters, and I think we're somewhere just shy of about 2,000 or maybe just over that have got to be replaced. We actually have about 800 in stock right now. So that we don't feel like it's going to really be a hill to climb. We also we had the opportunity to look at what has our growth been over the last few years and be able to kind of tweak those to make sure that new meter budget looks about like that growth. And then replacement of a Heatherstone well, it's just a capital improvement project for old generator there. And then other aging equipment and vehicles. So we'll talk through some of those. Some of our projects in water and sewer, Cabarrus Woods water line upgrades. I know you guys have worked on some of that and got a capital project already. And then our annual sewer rehabilitation. We'll jump into both of those a little bit. The Cabarrus Woods water line upgrades. This is the original project scope. Phase 1A has actually been completed. One of the things we've been able to do, and Rob had actually tasked me with this, is to go out, work with our teams to find out, what was the priority here? What is the priority? Is there need for the complete replacement of this? And we've been doing that over the last few months. We really feel like we've hit most of the higher priorities here. We do have a few connections to make to complete that project, but we do believe there's some opportunity for some of these dollars to be potentially rolled into some other funds, potentially some economic development in some of our other areas in town where we know we're going to have some opportunities, especially coming out of that capital project we just talked about from Black and Veatch. They are recommending some additional upgrades in some other areas that we may be able to use some funding for. No.
So we're doing this all cash?
We get fees. I mean, this is water and sewer fees going towards water and sewer customers.
So
No, these are our customers. So we take the water, because they pay water bills, but they don't pay taxes. So their water bill money can go to this, but it doesn't cover the cost of this. So, John is kind of couching his words with this a little bit throughout it, because one of the things we've tasked is just re-looking at this entire program out here. I think when it was originally launched by previous staff members, this was a lot cheaper. Cost of pipe and whatnot, and just everything that goes into it. And we probably have better opportunities as what's going on here?
Trying to figure something out here. We lost the presentation.
Okay. Everybody will get to look at me online here. So, part of what Councilman Fall mentioned earlier, what is this analysis that you look at? When this was kind of thought of as a big project, it was like, okay, we have the fees, these people are paying into it, these are probably our highest priority projects that we need for upgrades, but we have since moved into an area of economic development. And so economic development now becomes part of the equation of what projects need done, not just maintenance projects. So once you kind of run out of maintenance projects to do, then you go to areas like this and you start to look for those opportunities if the costs are cheap. But there are sections of this that intuitively I know need done to complete loops and do some upgrades to make this system work overall better, but we need to compare the rest of this versus our opportunities in the Moorhead small area, the sewer extensions in that same area, some of our utility upgrades that you might need on like a Woodside Drive. Is it time to relocate that water line if you're doing the roads? So I think we're committed to the kind of that phase 1A red area there. The rest of it's going to have to go through the analysis year by year as we go, but I would imagine some of that gets reallocated out. And part of that, Ron, is that we do kind of have synergy with tax money and water and sewer revenue money if we're going to do joint projects such as roadway projects. So we got to take that into account as well.
Should we consider, how in parks we did town versus EDJ and the rest as far as fees? Should we consider like a different fee structure?
We do that
Okay.
for water and sewer.
And that still doesn't cover.
Not for the. So there's a long history to this thing. This was a failed private water system that we ended up taking on, and that's just, I've seen this over and over in my career where you have private water systems and they run for profit, and they basically don't reinvest any of the stuff that we're talking about here. They do no capital expenditures. They just keep it going and going and going until it fails. And then you have a public health crisis. The company declares bankruptcy. They move on. And then you have residents, and who comes in? The government, right? The big mean government that nobody wants involved. This is when we absolutely want government involved. So the state had to find a water provider that could manage this, and none of us were involved in that negotiation, but certainly we didn't get the best side of that deal as far as state money to come in and help upgrade this. It was a system that was in pretty bad condition when we took it on, and it's gotten in worse condition over the years, and we've had to put much more money than we'll ever get out in user fees in this area. But it is what's good for the public, so that's our charge. Back to you, John.
So the other project, just really quick, we'll highlight. This is our annual sewer rehabilitation program. I know all of you enjoyed the pictures of the clean manhole on Monday night. So this is what this is involved. All the red highlighted are manholes throughout town, and we've hit a majority of those, or a lot of them already, with our sewer rehabilitation program. We're going to be doing some more of those in the upcoming program for next year. And then we have some other things going on with some of our lift stations and things like that as well. Again, just trying to maintain that system, make sure you're putting those dollars back into it. Because it's expensive once it goes bad.
And I'm going to ruin your momentum, John, but go back to that one for a moment. Yeah. I just, in just 10 seconds, I just want everybody to kind of look at this. I think it's a powerful picture when you just look at just this small area of the north side. Look how many manholes are there. Every single dot is a manhole that John and his folks have to maintain. And every red square are ones that were in severe condition that had to get that treatment that we went over. So I don't think the general public has an appreciation until you look at a map like this of just how many pieces of infrastructure you have in the ground. And every single one of these dots is connected by a pipe. So that's it, John. You can move on, but I just wanted to point out what you're looking at there and how impactful it is.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it's a small spot here, and we've got them throughout town, obviously, that are part of that. Some of our capital for water and sewer, as we mentioned earlier, the Heatherstone well generator replacement, that was a 2006 generator, so making sure that is in place is important. Make sure our wells are functioning. And then the Kubota RTV 900, that's actually one of our RTVs we utilize for maintenance along our water and sewer outfalls. That one is a 2006 as well. And then some of our capital vehicle replacements, as we talked about the fleet assessment program, we are going to be looking at all these coming up in the next few years, but these are some of our older vehicles and more high mileage vehicles that we already have in service, or potentially even with our new program, we're going to be looking at this. These have potentially a lot of maintenance or things that they've just outlived their service life. So you can see those 4 vehicles listed there that will be replaced. And then water and sewer 5-year expenses. Again, you're seeing a trend up there. That trend up is actually related to the increased water and sewer cost that we talked about earlier. But in general, it's pretty consistent. A lot of that I would expect to see, and you're probably going to continue to see. Again, capital infrastructure costs money. So it's important to make sure you invest that. And that actually goes into this capital on the water and sewer side. You can kind of see across the board, it's been a little bit of wonkiness going on there with it, but from a capital side, it's expensive to do water and sewer stuff. And so important you keep investing in there, which I love that we put together this capital improvement program from Black and Veatch to be able to invest those dollars. And that actually, talks about going into economic development as well and making sure you're putting them in the right spot. And that's all I have. I'll take questions.
One question in general, and maybe this is an overarching question about on fleet maintenance. How many vehicles do we have total as a town?
Brian, do you know that number? If it was just passenger vehicles and not the,
I know that we put 65 Samsara units in, so I think it's in the 75, 80 range for passenger vehicles.
Well, the question, and I can't find it in here right away. We had one vehicle that was 6, 7 years old, only had 50,000 miles on it, and it's up for replacement. And I get it, vehicles just get old, but there's not that far to go. Are we looking more holistically at this one's got 125,000, this one's got 25? Can we take this from parks and move it over to maintenance or something to get a little more juice out of that? I'm not denying that we don't need new vehicles after a certain amount of time, but 50,000 miles in 6 or 7 years sounds like it's been.
I just want to assure my staff that I didn't pay Chris to ask this question.
I'm not your plan. Yeah.
That's why John has that vehicle replacement charge for this next coming year that he had mentioned, where it's like analyzing how do we make that determination. Our previous policy was we're just going to replace everything every 6 years, and then we always have new equipment, so we're not spending a lot on maintenance. And that policy decision was made quite some time ago before we went apart, being maintained constantly just to keep them going. So it made sense at that point you kind of just had to go through and replace everything. I don't think that makes much sense now. So we need a more comprehensive replacement plan. A dump truck lasts a lot longer than a pickup truck. The one that you picked out is the one I mentioned as an example of one that Brian said, it's only got 50,000 miles. It's 5 years. We can get 5 more years out of it as a backup vehicle. It might not be a primary vehicle, but can we use it as a pool vehicle? And the answer is we don't know until we do that. And really, we're not going to, some of these capital requests on these vehicles, they're in there now as the worst case. As I said at the beginning, when we get through to draft 2, some of these might fall off and say, okay, that could be a replacement, or it can wait until this analysis is done, things like that. So
that 6 years came from, we started following county policy, and we adapted to those.
All right. I'm going to step away and let Devin come up. Thank you.
Congratulations, John. You made it through your first one unscathed.
So far.
They took it easy on you.
They did. Thank you.
At this point, we'll welcome up Devin Houston, our town engineer. He will go over both the engineering budget and the stormwater budget.
Okay. I'm already on. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We're going to start off with the engineering portion of the budget presentation. That's going to be on tab 11, I believe, in your packet. Yeah. All right. So engineering and stormwater budget presentation. Start off with the department organizational chart. Right now for engineering, we are 5 strong with 2 vacant positions that are currently being interviewed for this week, next week, and hopefully we'll have those filled very soon. That's the project manager and the GIS technician. And we don't have any current requests for any new personnel this fiscal year. This is just a bullet point of some of the functions that engineering does. We're behind the scenes a lot of things. These are the tasks that our budget, these numbers that you're going to see, are funding, so we can help make all the other departments work well and make the town make sure everything is operating well within, and new developments come in with our interests and the public's interest taken into account. From a 5-year expenses for engineering, you can see there's the trend here. There's kind of a gap between what was budgeted and what is actual. A lot of that is due, as you know, we suffered a lot of loss and turnover in personnel, so there's a lot of vacancies. That's part of it. And then one of my things that I'm going to be working towards over the next couple of years, is to right size this and close that gap a little bit and make sure we're accounting for everything properly. This is the capital outlook. this is really just vehicles for engineering currently. Right now, we just have one Ford Explorer that we are requesting new and one that we're requesting replacement of. And y'all just touched on this, and this is the replacement vehicle. And I put in here a few bullets about what our current vehicle replacement is. And this is subject to revision as we go through what John was mentioning about figuring out, so we can make sure we right size the fleet and have all of that taken care of. So we're not winding up with extra vehicles. And as Rob pointed out, it's just the typical 6-year cycle, and Councilman Smith mentioned it. We kind of got that from the county, I believe. And so no more than 2 vehicles at the same time. And then we did try to identify opportunities in the past to transfer vehicles between departments. And now we're going to hopefully refine the policy of that with John. As I said, we'll request 1 new vehicle next fiscal year. And that's going to be used by the GIS technician and the project manager, both positions that were new this year. So they're both going to be partially field related, so they definitely need something to get around town. If you would like, tab number 30, I believe, is stormwater in your packet. And this is, again, this is the stormwater budget stays kind of flat, just a couple of ebbs and flows here. One of the bigger changes for this fiscal year is now that we're much more fully staffed, or close to fully staffed, there's an $80,000 expense that has been charged for some outfall inspections of the storm outlets throughout the town. We've been doing through a consultant, and this was a requirement of our MS4 permit for the stormwater permit for the town. Now that we're fully staffed, we're able to take that in-house. The current consultant is finishing up their process and building the database for us that we'll be able to continue on and go through the next few years with that. Same sort of capital outlook. This is mostly what builds up here is our storm drain maintenance spot improvements annually. As you go further out, this is admittedly left over from previous. I've got to vet through some of this further out stuff. Been focused more on the closer targets here. So that some of that may change out in the future, but currently the next project we're looking at in the stormwater spot improvement is the culvert at Piccadilly Lane. And it needs some improvements there to keep it from washing out. So once we have enough funding there, and once we get a good idea of the cost of that project, it is something that will probably be coming to council in the future. As Rob mentioned a couple of times, the big focus this year on coming up with some initiatives for efficiency and some innovation throughout the town to try to help things go along a little bit better. One of the things that I've come to notice as I started here is we have a good base of standard details and of what we require our developers and our construction to look like, but it's small. And small is good in some instances, but I think here we need a much more extensive library. We create this library, and what it will help do is put some continuity into the designs of the different neighborhoods that come in. We won't have to guess what that road's going to look like. We'll all have a good idea. This is our detail. This is our standard. That's going to be a neighborhood road. That's going to be a commercial road. We know what that's going to look like. When you drive into town, there's going to be that continuity, that design. So help with the branding, not of the logo, but the branding of our public spaces. So I think that'll help. It'll help with efficiency when the developers, the designers are working in their projects. They won't have to reach out to us as often. They won't run the risk of guessing this is what we want it to look like, and then our review process extends on because no, this is our detail. This is what we want it to look like. So that's the hope there with that one. The next one is in the same realm of things. When you got planning, they come in, they have their whole process of development. Well, there's many other things that are involved in that. There's individual houses that come in that need grading permits, sewer and water permit applications, public street infrastructure. When those developments are complete, we've got to take those. Those processes are happening now, but one of the things that I noticed when I came on board is that they're happening, but there's no clear path of how they're happening. It's getting done, but I've had to come and I've had to ask questions and figure out and iron out the process. And what this would do is sort of iron out some of those standard operating procedures, get them written down. So if in the future there is staff turnover, they're more equipped to come in and step in and be walking or running rather than the crawl phase. So that'll introduce some efficiency in there. And my presentation is not as long or as in depth as John's was. So the next one is the thank you and the questions slide, and I would be happy to take those.
Ian likes your presentation a lot better.
Not a competition.
Just had a general comment since we started talking about vehicles. A couple of years ago, coming out of COVID, it was kind of hard for us to fulfill our, all our vehicle orders. And it seems like this last year it's gotten better and it's easier. And we don't know if we're going into more uncertain times again. So I think that if there's anything that needs to be replaced, should be replaced now between inflation and all the other things. I don't think delaying we would benefit in any way.
And I'm just taking a note of that because I'm writing it down. And that is that is a kind of balance that we're doing right now, is trying to figure out, how many of these do we push off, but I don't want to push them off prematurely because of exactly what you said. And if ultimately we get through our fleet management analysis, and it's not too far off from what we're doing, now we're going to have to double up next year, right? And that just budgetary wise, sometimes that isn't the best decision either. So that is something that we're looking at. I'm taking a note of who writes these suggestions down so I can remind myself later. But yeah, there is kind of a double-edged sword with, some of these, can we just make practical decisions? But remember, this budget doesn't start until July 1. So we might have some of this analysis done, leave these in the budget, but not necessarily execute it on all of them, execute it on the ones that fit the new policy, but pre-fund them in case we need them. We've done that with deputy vehicles and things like that in COVID. As you'd mentioned, we don't think we can get them, but we'd rather have the money and not get them than vice versa, kind of a scenario. So point well taken.
Anybody else? Y'all are taking it too easy on me. John's going to be jealous.
Thank you, Devin.
Sending off what you've done.
He's used to it. He got a few years under his belt. He's been through a few of these. Yeah. Now we intentionally put what I perceive as some of our easier departments in the first meeting, and put the parks and fire and planning and the rest of our tougher budgets in our second meeting. So you'll have to wait until the 26th to really turn loose. Our departments are here to support each other and to see the type of questioning we may get so they can prepare for whatever type of posture we are receiving. So yes, everybody will be here, and at the next one, all the people that presented tonight will be here at that one as well.
Ian's perplexed that he's here for fun.
Yeah, and well, I think fun is a pseudonym. But with that, I will welcome to the stage Taisha to do our human resource budget.
Thank you. Devin, you went way too quick. I was still prepping back there. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for being here tonight and taking time for us to present our budgets to you. So I'll be presenting the HR budget. Just to go over our agenda, a few highlights that I'll be covering tonight is a snapshot of some department metrics, programs and projects, some efficiency and innovation plans, and budget highlights. So our organizational chart is made up of 4 employees in the HR department. This year, we're not asking for any new personnel. So looking at our 5-year trend expense, the one thing that I would say to highlight is where we peaked out at is where we added new staff just to handle the volume of work that was coming through the department. But we have flattened out, so we're more constant and more stable at this point. So just a snapshot. This is not an all-inclusive. This is just a snapshot of where we are as an organization from a growth perspective. We broke it down to part-time and full-time just to give you an average. Sometimes the number is higher, sometimes the number is lower. As you can see, for the part-time, we're pretty consistent and constant with 8 part-time employees. And that doesn't include our seasonal, which I'll cover in a couple minutes. For our full-time, we've had some constant growth. If you look at 2022, we was at 109. Projected for 2025, we'll be at 122 full-time employees. So we have a constant growth, which is good. It means that we're doing a lot of good things and that we're bringing in folks to actually help cover the workload for the different departments.
Do we still have the comparison of other municipalities where we, for headcount? When you put that up, reminded me that I think we were severely under from previous years, but
we'll share that at the next one. We do have that. We went over that last year in our budget process on kind of our employee per capita and all other kind of metrics to measure how many employees, and we lead the market in that. We have less employees than almost anybody that we compare to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So our average seasonal employee count is a little bit different than what you see for our full-time and part-time employee count. There has been a significant increase, as the line graph will show you. In 2022, we had 29. And that was just for a season, basically our basketball season. In 2025, we're actually projecting 80. And with Parks and Rec doing a lot more now, we hire all year round for them. So we do a lot of onboarding for Park, which is significant increase, and which added to the workload of the HR department. So this is not an all-inclusive, but these are some of my favorite programs and some that stand out. So one I'll be speaking about is our safety program. And this program is really important to, I think, everyone here on the management team. Is safety first. We always want to make sure that our employees come in, do a job, but that they're doing it in the safest way possible. Because I never want to be the one to have to call and say that your loved one didn't make it home. So we really incorporate that into our culture. We do that with having safety committees. We do mock OSHA inspections. We make sure departments do departmental training. And so we make sure all of those things are extremely important to everyone so that that's not secondary, that's always primary. Another way with our safety program is we do have a SHARP awardee, and that's a designation from the state. And our awardee is Public Works. And so many of you that have been here probably participated in that program. I think we had a lunch or something for them during that time, but they had to recertify all the time. So it's not a one and done. And so we support them in that effort as far as any paperwork needs to be filled out, making sure the training is done, anything that needs to be repaired. And so we just support them in that process because they work really hard to get the designation. So we want to make sure that they keep it. And then, of course, we want to brag on ourselves a little bit. And so we always apply every year for safety awards, and that's with the Department of Labor. Usually the Labor Commissioner comes out for lunch and present these awards. And I'm happy to say that both administration and Public Works is getting gold again this year. This will be administration's 7th consecutive year and Public Works 3rd. So we're really proud of that and the accomplishments of not just one person, but just the entire town. Our next program that I really, really enjoy, and our employees really enjoy, because we did some surveying just to make sure that we weren't doing feel goods, and employees like, oh, that's not a good program. So the feedback that we received is a program that they really, really like and they want to see stay around. With that, we take a well-rounded approach because everybody has different needs. So we tap into the mental, especially after 2020. That's extremely important that we do that. The physical, we tap into nutritional, which is really important in having that balance, and then financial, because a lot of people don't think that financial plays into it, but that adds a certain level of stress. And so we try to make sure that we give employees all the tools and resources that they need. Some of the ways we do that is through programming and our Wellness Fest, which is our biggest program that we do have. We bring a lot of resources in so the employees can get information. It's an opportunity for them to get to know each other. We do a wellness walk, so we add the physical component to it, and it's just a good time. Some other things we do is lunch and learns, and we get feedback from employees, or we know, hey, we might hear that, strokes is on the rise. We might do stroke prevention, or we just recently did identity theft because it's that time of year where you get all these scam calls. So we want to make sure people are diligent about that. Occasionally, we'll do a wellness challenge because we just want to, sometimes, I know for my mind, trick people into exercising or drinking more water. So we kind of tap into the competitive side of employees, and that might just be a way to get them going so that they can keep moving. And then one of the things that employees really like is that one-on-one coaching, because we all have different needs, and sometimes you want to keep that confidential, so they have an opportunity to talk and say, hey, listen, my numbers came in not so good at the doctor. I don't know what to do. Can you help me come up with a plan? So that's really important for us. And then we always like to recognize the efforts that's done by the organization. And so this year, we're going to be applying for the Healthiest Employer Award. We've won that award twice in years past, but as a small employer. It's a little bit different as a mid-sized employer, but I think that we're in a good position that we should do really well. So I'll keep you all posted on how well we do with that. Next is recognition. And so recognition is kind of near and dear to me. I think everybody sitting here in the audience and around the table likes to be valued and appreciated. And so we do that with some of the programs that we do throughout the year. Our holiday party is a big hit for our employees. And then in the springtime, we do an employee appreciation and Kannapolis at the Cannonballers. So our employees get to enjoy baseball game. Rob insists on fireworks, so we make sure we put it on the night for fireworks. Employees bring their families out. We provide a meal, and it's just a good time. A lot of times I sit back because it's really hard to get my teenage children out there, but so I get to sit back and just look at all the camaraderie and people introducing their families and just really proud. And so that's a good moment for us. Other ways that we recognize our employees is through our service awards. Of course, we appreciate the longevity and the institutional knowledge that our tenured employees provide. And then another program that I really enjoy, because this is one that employees nominate each other, and that's our Star Awards. That's our special thanks and recognition. And so we actually get nominations every year, and then we vote on it. And that's the department heads vote to figure out who's our Star Award winner. And we do that. And I think many of you have attended in years past when we used to do in council meetings, but now we actually have a separate award ceremony. And we recognize and announce who that Star Award winner is. But we not only do that, we also recognize the nominees, because we think it's really important that your peers think a lot of you, that they would want to recognize you. So. And then occasionally we'll have a special award. If someone does something really special, Rob will say, you know what, come up with a Good Samaritan or some type of award to recognize. The whole point is we all work for a paycheck, right? That's how we feed our families. But I think it takes special people to want to come here and to work and to provide service. And so our job from the HR standpoint is to show how much we appreciate them due to various things that we do. So turning gears to some of the projects that HR is working on, has worked on, and will work on is our performance evaluation system. We actually switched to a new system, but besides switching to a new system, we actually put a guide together and somewhat of a tutorial so that we can take the subjectivity out of the evaluations and they become more objective and they can be consistent across departments. That's really important because you don't want one department doing it one way and another department doing it another way. So this new system, we're about 90% there. We think is going to be great across the whole organization. From last year, we implemented the flexible employer contribution. So that was fun, and the administration of it is even funner. But what I love about this is that the employees appreciate it. And we have found that this has been a great retention tool and an even greater recruitment tool. When we talk about our benefits match not only the industry of governmental employees, but also the private sector, and that's pretty big. So we're really excited about that. And then some other things that we've worked on is streamlining and become more efficient in the onboarding process and the employee experience, because that first day when people come in, they're just trying to learn names, never mind having 50 pages of benefit information to go through. So we've worked really hard to streamline that process. And then lastly, the revamp of our current employment application. I know Rob has spoke about it, us trying to get the best talent in. Well, the best talent or any talent really don't want to spend 2 hours on the employment application and applying for a job. They want the best way to streamline that process. So we're working on that to really try to streamline it so people can, take 10, 15, 20 minutes, get the information in, we get it, and then we can start the process going. So from an efficiency and innovation plan, we will be working with our finance department and looking at a new integrated HRIS and payroll system where it provides better reporting mechanisms. There's a true integration there between different modules, eliminating some of the manual processes and providing better customer service. So we're going to do a lot more digging than just a demo. We're actually going to go out to some of their customers and actually see how those systems actually work, because demos you get a different preview than when you see someone actually working in it. So that's a plan that Brian and I have for this year, and our plan is to start it at the beginning of the year so that we're not having crossovers with W-2s if possible. So Rob may chime in a little bit because this is a shared baby of his and ours. Is we're in a research phase of this where we're looking at a retiree health benefit account, and I think that's the last piece to our flexible employer contribution plan. It will assist employees who are eligible to retire but not eligible for Medicare. So there's that gap between not having insurance and not necessarily being able to afford insurance. The other thing about this program is it allows us to remain competitive in the market because some of our close neighbors have programs already that help their retirees from a medical standpoint. So it's not anywhere near where we're ready to present it to you, but we are in that phase and that stage, and Rob may be bringing it later on in the budget process. Rob, I don't know if you want to add on now.
I'll add just a quick tidbit to this. Similar to our vehicle replacement plan, this is one of those innovations that we've talked about now every year, and several of the council people here, but certainly Councilman Smith has pushed us very hard on the fact that it's very tough for us to compete on compensation with the private sector. So what can we do on being creative on our benefits? How do we retain and attract employees? And, we've outperformed that in spades. I mean, we have the best benefit program, and at a lower cost than almost all of our neighbors, because we're the only ones that are willing to kind of do the hard work that it takes to do something like the FEC program, where we allow people to choose very cradle to grave. What depends where you're at in your life is how our benefits impact you, and our employees really appreciate that, and the people that are considering us as an employer really appreciate that. One of the few things really, I think this is the only thing that I've seen that anyone else offers that we don't, and it's not a lot, but it's some of the bigger cities, is the retiree health benefit, and there's some issues and challenges to how do you fund something like that, which is part of what we're going through right now. But we do believe there's a way for us to bring that on again at a lower cost without the actuarial issues, pre-funding something like this to come up with a solution to really two issues. This type of benefit, if you have an employee that you've invested in for 15 years or so, and now they're a pretty valuable employee, right? I mean, they started here at 25, and they're an assistant director, and they've been here 15 years, and are now 40, and they're ready to take a director role somewhere. And a benefit like this can keep them in your organization, because you would lose it if you leave, right? You've got your 15 years in, and I've kind of vested in this healthcare thing. So it takes a little more to get some of those high talent employees that you have pulled out of the system. I know there are several employees that have considered us, and they were in other towns and said, well, I'm too close to getting the healthcare benefit where I'm at. I'm gonna have to stay. And the other is a cost reduction. We have some employees that have 30 years in, and certainly, especially on our front line folks, right? So think more of our laborers or our water or sewer workers. They've put in 30 years of body intensive and grueling work. They're ready to retire. They can't afford health care. They're 50, 55 years old. They need to get to Medicare eligible. The only thing is they're okay financial wise, but they have this question out there. Where's that gap come from? Those employees generally tend to be a higher cost employee, and helping them get into retirement, public retirement, while they await health care, and being able to backfill that with a lower cost employee saves us some money as well. So we kind of get a twofold benefit of retaining some of our folks that have risen to director, assistant director roles. I don't know what that sound is either. I see everybody looking around here. But it helps us retain some of these employees, and it also helps us get the employees that are ready to retire, want to retire, but only hanging on for health care. This is a low-cost way that kind of pays for itself in the long run. So we have a little bit to work out on what does this look like? How do you set it up? Is it a 15-year vesting? Is it a 20-year vesting? What cost do we have in there? How do you pay for it? Those types of things. But overall, we think it's an area we want to eventually recommend to the town.
So, Rob, you stole a little bit of my thunder with the program considerations, but you did a fantastic job. So, like Rob said, these is in a preliminary stage, but these are some of the considerations that he mentioned, which was the funding, what the criterion would look like, whether we do a catch-up provision for tenured employees that's close to retirement age. Are there any legal and tax implications in how best to manage it? This is a lot of outside of the box thinking. So a lot of times when we go to professionals, they're kind of stumped because they're like, what is this? Where is it coming from? But we challenge them, and we challenge ourselves to try to be as creative as possible. And then lastly, this is the highlight of my budget. Pre-employment is being consolidated to HR, breaking news all. So they just figure it's best to manage it under us, since we do the job postings, we do all the background checks, we do all the drug screening. So it's just a better way to manage it. So thank you. Do you have any questions for me?
So Rob mentioned, we've pushed on you guys to find more than just money, right? Mm-hmm. You've been on this path for, I think, 3 years now. Is there one benefit that you just look at and go, this was probably the best thing that we ever could have offered these guys that you've done in the last 3 years? How has that been? I mean,
the flexible employer contribution has been terrific. Rob challenged us, and when he first did it, we were like, Rob, this is not possible. And he said, you guys are some smart people, make it work. And we were really excited that he did that because that is the best program that we have. Are there challenges to administering it? Absolutely. But from an employee perspective, from a retention perspective, from a recruiting perspective, it knocks it out the box. I sit on an advisory board for the league with other HR professionals, and we share what we're doing. When I explained it to them, they said, Taisha, you guys can keep that. And I said, thank you very much because you're our competition.
Have you seen your retention?
Right.
Have you seen your retention decrease? I mean, as far as there for a while, we were in a space where private was stealing a lot of your employees. Mm-hmm. So by enhancing these benefits, are you starting to see the folks stick around longer? And
Yes, it has definitely stabilized since we've implemented this program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as a reminder for those, we use FEC, flexible employee contribution, a lot, but we came up with that name after they approved it. So, we were calling it different things the whole time, but, so we have this pile of benefits that we've added: the adoption benefit, the elderly care benefit, the daycare, student loan repayment, retirement, 401k, 457, and it's a ton of things that we've added incrementally over the years. And the flexible employee contribution, and again, we're the only people in the state doing this, but it allows the employee to direct their contribution to what benefits them the most. You got a kid in daycare, put it all there. That might give you the best tax benefit to it. You don't have kids in daycare and you're really trying to sock it away for retirement, put it all there. Maybe you want to split some of this up into different things. You have some school loans, but they're not, the full amount that we would give you. You can put some in school loans, you can put some in daycare. It's really up to you. And what I've seen on the offers that I've been able to make out to employees is it's really impactful, because when they look at it, they think about, what is the benefit that I like? Mm-hmm. And then that's all they focus on. And this gives us the ability to kind of, make every employee that wants to come here or is considering coming here, or currently works here, it makes them special, right? The benefit is crafted to them through this process. Now, like I said, Brian and Taisha, who are very smart people, did figure this out and are able to manage this. And there is extra work associated with it. But, I think that's part of what we do as a group and what we do as a community. And Ron alluded to it earlier when we talk about our number of employees for output, or number of employees for residents, or number of employees for overall budget, and we always outperform. We do more with less by doing that. We have great people. We're very creative. We're not afraid to go outside of the comfort zone of the industry standards and say, maybe the industry's wrong. Maybe we can do it better. And we've seen that pay dividends in the idea of, very few communities are doing partial in-house solid waste like we are, where we've brought in cans, but we're not doing the rest. They generally wait until it's all or nothing. So, trying to look at things incrementally, we are able to provide the same services that other communities offer at a much higher level with less employees and a lower budget and a lower tax rate. So that's something we're really proud of. That's something we're committed to long term. And I think this budget shows it over and over. And I'll summarize it at the end. We're not asking to expand anything budgetarily this year. We're staying flat. And I think that's an important recognition to make in times like this, where we've had substantial cost pushed onto households and in the form of taxes and inflation and uncertainty. So, we're committed to doing more with less and providing the best services at a very reasonable cost. And you should make sure that I have the talent in the building that we need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Taisha,
Yes.
I do have a couple of questions. I'll be real quick, but
Sure.
I love recognition. I think it's fantastic. If there's anything that we could do, a note from the mayor or council signing their star award, and I did attend the star award, and I was just like humbled by the dedication that we have. So anything that we could do to add on or pile on to that recognition would be helpful.
Okay.
And that can happen throughout the year. Doesn't have to wait till the end of the year. Like, hey, we just had a great story. Thought council would like to know, or chime in, or send them an email or something. That would be helpful.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. We would love that.
The other thing I would ask, if it's not already being done, is if there are Employee of the Month or the Harrisburg Hero, that be published on the website. Hey, so and so just celebrated 30 years with us and saved a baby from the railroad track on his way to work this morning, or whatever it is, and get that information out there so the public can see how many people are working for them, and use our communication devices to get that out.
I definitely can work with communications. I know we do it internally through our employee newsletter that Casey and her team does, but we definitely can get it out to the public as well.
Yeah, that's juice. I mean, we might not be able to pay them everything in the world, but they can run on that for a little while too. So the other thing I would ask is, and you probably told us this, work from home, where are we on that? And how is that official policy? I know it varies by job. The claw guy can't take work from home, but other people can. And is that changing?
Well, yeah, it's all in flux. And I think the industry's in flux in general, but specifically to us, we're experimenting with different types of work schedules, flexible schedules, shortened week schedules. Right now, we're experimenting with a 80-hour week schedule for everybody in this room, because that's what we're doing. And then we'll get then we'll get back on to looking at how we do some of that. But right now it's very just employee specific and need specific. But one of the problems that I think we found with work from home, in particular, let's say, it was kind of thrust onto everybody in COVID. So nobody was prepared for it. And it works good for a short period of time. And then, like anything else, you find some of the flaws in it. And one of our flaws was because it was thrust on us. Nobody knows how to manage remote employees. How do you measure success? How do you collaborate? How do you have these things? So working that into a process and seeing if that is a standard that you can have. The other issue is 80% of our employees work in the field. So from a town standpoint, a lot of our folks support people who are boots on the ground. So it'd be tough for like John to work from home when all those guys are out here picking up trash, right? They need their leader present, getting them going in the morning. There's levels of supervision there, and then you just kind of you need operations. So it really starts to become, I think, to us, job specific, right? Some things, finance people who are less interactive, they're doing a lot of work at their desk for most of the day. They're not in a lot of staff meetings and things like that. They're pushing through these invoices. That's probably a little easier to do remote than somebody, let's say, in purchasing, who needs to talk to the guys about how much pipe do you need, how many bolts do you need, how these things go. So short story long there is that we're measuring.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one for you. You got to thread the needle, and it's a little different with public employees. God forbid somebody see them out at the Walmart at 3:00 in the afternoon. Really? You're a town employee, and it's 3:00, and you're at Walmart, and I paid you? And I mean, I think it's tough. And yeah, because I was working at 8:00 last night. You didn't see that, but
yeah.
And I think you hit it. Sentiment is going to continue to change, and we're competing for private sector people, and their sentiment is changing over time. So you guys are going to have to manage through that over the next months.
Yeah, I mean, 3 years ago when I started this role, it was like if you didn't offer work from home, you were a dead employer. I mean, that's it. You either work from home or you're dying. Now it's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Now almost every large company in America says, I don't care if you've worked from home for 20 years. I want you back in the office for no reason. What office? I don't have one. Get in the closet. I don't care. So it's kind of this whipsaw back and forth, and we try not to whipsaw, right? We're trying not to make any irrational policies that that don't fit. But yeah, it's certainly a challenge that I've put on Lee as far as operations is, hey, if we can build a better mousetrap, let's do it. I need to be able to measure success and make sure that we're fulfilling our mission to the public and getting the best out of our employees.
Well, good luck with that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one. On your performance reviews, do you have the subordinates do a review on their managers?
No.
You don't?
No.
And I'm going to speak as if Rob is sitting right there. He's one of the folks that works or is hired directly by us. And we don't really see metrics on how everyone in the town reacts to his, let's call it management style. Is that something you'd consider implementing so that we get metrics back on his performance and then managers get metrics back on how their subordinates feel about them?
So short answer is I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm just being honest, I think it would be really difficult to have that, especially we operate in transparency. And so that may be a little bit more difficult for employees, good or bad, to share that information. So
you don't think they're willing to?
No, and that's not to say that there's anything negative. It's just even when we send surveys out, we find it challenging. And we're just asking you how the party was. And, they're like, is this anonymous? Is this going to be, is my name going to be out there? And so I just think that people just are very cautious just in general and may not want to provide good or bad feedback.
I would echo that. I mean, I lived in an environment, and you can ask the question, like, my manager understands me, my goals are clearly defined, I feel like I'm understood, and that comes back as a reflection. It's a 360 view. Oh, yeah. All right. That's right.
Yeah, it's something to think about, just because the best feedback I get every year is from folks that work for me that tell me how I can improve. And it just leads, in my opinion, to a better organization. Maybe it's different in the public sector, but I'll just give you, for instance, I'll run my mouth a lot, and I'm like, oh, here's a new project. It's not very fun, but we got a new project. And I had someone say, it feels better when we think every project is fun. So maybe quit that editorializing and saying, here's a boring project, let's knock it out, right? And so I had to make that change for myself, but it made our organization better. Food for thought. I'm not asking you to do anything. Okay. Just think about that two-way two-way street.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little more.
Let me know how Rob's doing.
Yeah, that's
Are you looking for feedback on him or the organization as a whole? Because I'm thinking someone like in John's world that's out in the community all day, I don't know how much feedback he could give us on Rob.
Yeah.
Right? He could give us a ton of feedback on John as his, department manager.
I think it's a two-parter. I was just trying to give some helpful advice and roll that into okay, we've got folks that are performing way better than any town per person, per resident. Rob, I kind of know how you are. I don't want to get to a point where if you push them too hard, we start falling apart. Yeah. And I realize I'm saying this while you're sitting there, and I'm not trying to be critical, but if you don't measure those as you're going along, it happens slowly and then all at once. Just something.
Yeah, we've talked about this previously, and we've talked about this internally a little bit about how do you measure that. Now, Taisha is right on that, and her and I have disagreed on it, and then I was wrong. But we don't get, for whatever reason, and maybe it's private and public's a little bit different, but we get better information, the larger the sample size. And so when we do organizational wide, we'll get better feedback, and we implement that, and we can make the change. As we do, because we're a small organization, if you start aggregating things, and we talked, I'm gonna have Taisha's staff do her review. She's got 2 people. If one's good and one's bad, she's gonna know whose is. So everybody's gonna give her a good review because they know that she can figure it out, right? Give your boss a bad review. It's like, I wouldn't give you guys a bad review. Well, everybody's perfect. But if you widen out that sample size, there are ways for us to get that information out. And part of what we have in here, funding wise, is some more of that surveying, and that all kind of falls in communication. But how do we get surveys back from people to know that? Are you, and we did one of these in the fall, do you feel valued in your role? Do you feel overwhelmed in your role? Do you feel like you have the resources that you need to get your job done? Do you feel like your coworkers are supporting you in your role, or pulling their weight in their role, that kind of thing? So, and we did that before and after we changed work hours. So before we did the Woo Day, every other Friday off scenario, we gave the exact same survey 12 weeks later and compared those. So that's generally where we get that information back, and that's available and we can share it. But maybe there's something more pointed that we can figure out. Like I said, we got smart people. They can figure it out.
I would venture to say 5 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, that was probably a hard pass no on getting folks to chime in and offer some suggestions. But I think you guys have really stepped up that level of stability and transparency. With time, maybe that's something that you can revisit.
Okay.
And maybe people will participate more.
It's worth the thought and a conversation.
Absolutely. Okay, going once, going twice. Thank you all. Have a good night.
All right, next up, we have our town clerk, Janet Rackley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Now, if you like Devin's presentation, you'll love mine. It's the shortest of the night. Okay.
Competition already.
Well, that's part of the wellness thing, the challenges, right? Okay, brings out our competitive side. So as you can see, there's not much to tell here on my budget. It is reduced slightly overall. That was just due to some slight changes in digitizing minutes, cost of some department things, supplies, and some advertising changes that are being not being done in my department now. So that's a good thing. Rob talked about innovations and process improvements. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is trying to keep council packages digitally going forward, and eventually going back and getting all of the old ones digitized and moved into an online space so that we don't have to keep paper copies of everything. Historically, we have kept copies of the entire packet, which, sometimes can be very short. Sometimes we've had them as high as 800 pages for 1 month, and that's crazy, but we keep every piece of paper. We are only legally required to keep the official documents of council, such as the minutes or the ordinances, resolutions, those types of things, by paper. So what I'm doing is just scanning the entire packet now and only keeping those pieces of paper that we have to keep. And that's going to do a lot for reducing our storage space, reducing really eliminating the need for budget, I'm so sorry, minutes books, which have gotten really expensive. I used to be able to get them for $35, $40. They're $100 now, and they're smaller. So that's great. So once I do all of that and get all these past ones done, that will free up all of those books to be used for future. And it will be easier to go back and pull out those documents that people need. Just this week, I had an employee who said, hey, I need something out of a packet from 2015. Do we possibly have it? Yes, we did. But I had to go into storage and pull out the book and pull all of that. It'd be easier just to email it to her from an online file. So that's the process that we're working on now. What I would like to move forward to is a digital records policy for the whole town so that we can digitize all of our records that we have to keep. Personnel records, minutes, all of those things. Planning has a lot of documents that have to be kept forever as well. So if we can do that without having to keep them in paper and just digitize everything, that would be great. It's a bit of a process, and I'm just looking into it and starting to investigate what all is needed to do that, because you all would have to approve the policy once we get it set, and the state agency, the Department of Cultural and Natural Resources, they have to approve it. And so I would have to work with IT and finance if there's any cost to whatever program or software or whatever's needed to safely digitize those and keep those records permanently. But it would be a process to go through all that. And then later on, we would get that approval from the state agencies and from you all and start the implementation on getting all that done. It would be, I think, a long process with the number of documents and 51 years of those documents to go back and do, but eventually we could get that done. And certainly going forward, we wouldn't be keeping any new paper. That would be a good thing for us. So it would eliminate the need for these fire safe file cabinets and all of that taking up space as well. And that is the end of mine. Do you have any questions for me? Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next up, Communications Department. Casey will be wowing everybody with her budget.
I've heard communications mentioned several times tonight, so I'm sure there's a list of questions coming. I'm here tonight to talk about the fiscal year 26 Communications Department budget. The Communications Department is myself as the Communications Director, and then we have Virginia Townsend acting as our Communications Manager. Small but mighty. Here is our 5-year expense graph, and you'll see this gap primarily for some turnover in the department those first couple of years, but our projected spending line is expected to increase to align with the strategy that the Communications Department has worked really hard to establish over the past year, and I feel confident that our budget requests this year do align with this strategy that we've set. Speaking of strategy, this strategy is really to let the community know who we are, who is the town of Harrisburg. And this strategy aims to establish Harrisburg as a premier family-friendly community through engaging and transparent communication that fosters a community of pride, strengthens relationships, and promotes a high quality of life. And our audience for this strategy are our residents, our families, new residents, long-term residents, our businesses in our community, our visitors, and our regional partners such as the county, Explore Cabarrus, and YMCA. Going into the tactics that I've set to accomplish this strategy for fiscal year 26, with the focus on programming, specifically youth council service projects, youth council meetings, crisis communication and training for our staff, community engagement initiatives like surveys, focusing on advertising with our branded promotional items, focusing on in-house professional services, creating in-house videos, examples of reels that we post on our social media platforms, while also sustaining a contract with Michael Anderson for our professional photography needs, and focusing on technology services and ADA compliance software called Moncito, a project management tool for the communications department itself called Airtable, and increasing our presence on LinkedIn. Going back to programming, specifically Youth Council, the communications department has really worked hard over the last 12 months to elevate the Youth Council program and really get it to where it is today. And I want to ride that momentum. I want to continue to tailor the Youth Council experience to provide exceptional opportunities for our students that they may not get in clubs and organizations they're a part of in school. I know each of our youth council members either plays on a team, another organization at school. I want to make youth council unique and say that they only were able to be exposed to this because they were a part of youth council. Crisis communication training. The goal here is to equip our staff with the skills to effectively respond to a crisis while also protecting the town's reputation. And this would be done by developing a comprehensive crisis communication training plan. This will be done in-house, and this would be constantly used to guide our response efforts in the case that anything happens. Lastly, we want to increase our community engagement initiatives through regular forums and surveys to gather feedback from our residents. We want to kind of take a pulse on the community and see where we can fill in the gaps as town staff and as the department itself. We want to promote events with direct contact and emergency alerts if we need, and we want to collaborate with local businesses for public engagement opportunities with council. Going into our advertising strategy, as the town of Harrisburg, our key messages here are to promote our community, our quality of life, and our economic opportunity. And the main channels that we're doing this currently is our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, our email marketing, e-newsletters that send out on the first of every month, our print advertising direct mail to residents, our online ads through paid advertising channels. And with this advertising strategy in mind, we want to really grow our branding exposure over the next year. The goal here is to boost the recognition of Harrisburg, making the town memorable and recognizable. When people in Harrisburg look over, see our logo, see our color scheme, see our name, really know that they're in Harrisburg with all of these great things that we have to offer. We also want to improve our quality of merchandise for our residents and visitors, ensuring that items are practical while also encouraging long-term use for continued brand exposure, ensuring that our items are inclusive for different age groups, seniors, family-friendly, kids, and also ensuring that our branded promotional items are used in county initiative sponsorships, other town partnerships like Explore Cabarrus with a visitor bag, having something Harrisburg NC branded in that visitor bag, the YMCA, of course, the Chamber, just a couple of examples there. Going into our professional services, as mentioned earlier, we do want to maintain our professional photography contract with Michael Anderson Photography, but we would like to decrease our contracted videography needs. And that's because we found that we're shooting and editing a lot of our videos in-house. We're increasing our engagement on our various video formats by the videos that we're doing in-house. A couple of examples of that. This is an example, or this is actually a video that the department produced for our largest event of the year, our July 4th celebration. And this video was to show the viewing locations for our fireworks show. This video was completely shot by our town staff, edited and back in-house, and posted on our Facebook and Instagram platforms before the event. And we were able to reach about 3,200 people with this video. A different format of a video that we did was a storytelling piece with our town engineer, Devin Houston, and we used his story about his experience in the military and showcased that experience for Veterans Day as just a thank you to all the veterans in our community, including our staff members. We shot this as a reel and posted it on our Instagram platform, and we were able to engage about 2,100 viewers there. And lastly, this video showcased a town project that was complete, the Harrisburg Park Pond project. This video, again, completely shot in-house with our in-house drone operator, video editing, everything, shared on Facebook with about 4,700 views there. So really showcasing all the great things in our community on our social media platforms, doing that completely in-house. Going into our technology services. So in April of 2024, the Department of Justice updated its ruling stating that local governments need to make their websites and their mobile apps ADA accessible. And the deadline to do this for municipalities under 50,000 population is April 2027. So we want to get the ball rolling on this. Our website vendor, Civic Plus, offers an extension of their services called Moncito. And Moncito is a web governance tool that does a scan of our website and identifies accessibility issues for us to go in and fix. So they'll identify pictures without a caption on them, in case someone has a screen reader on their computer, missing text, broken links, maybe incomplete sentences, missing punctuation, anything that may be hard for someone with a disability to find information on our website. This platform goes in and identifies all that for us to fix that. So I did a little practice with Moncito, and currently our website is at 66% accessible. The industry standard right now is 91%, so there is some opportunity for growth here. If this feature were to be established on our website, the user would have this toolbar pop up on the website as an extension of the experience, and they can really personalize their experience and how they want to navigate our website. They can increase the text size, the font, spacing, place a screen reader, adjust the image size. They can cater that experience to what they need when they are using the harrisburgnc.gov website. Continuing on with our technology services, mentioned earlier, increasing our presence on LinkedIn. We want to be able to post our job postings and openings for the town directly on our LinkedIn platform, as well as enhancing our recruiting tool for potential candidates on LinkedIn. If a candidate reaches out to us, we're able to poach candidates on LinkedIn, really increasing our interaction on our LinkedIn platform. And lastly, a communications department management tool, project management tool. So the communications department works with all departments in the town, and we have a dozen projects going on at one time. So this Airtable software would really help us manage those projects, as well as plan our social media calendar and content for the future. And our measurements for success for these tactics for 25-26 is monitoring our website engagement and traffic. We want to be able to see an increase in our website usage, identify what pages are most popularly visited, how long people are staying on the pages, ensuring that our residents and anyone going to our website is finding the information that they need. Increasing our social media reach and engagement. Looking at our resident feedback and satisfaction through the surveys that I mentioned earlier, increasing our accolades in third-party publications, magazines, other websites, really bragging on the really great things that the town of Harrisburg is doing, and seeing a growth in our business development and economic development. And I'm happy to answer any questions for the communications department.
YouTube. You guys anywhere on YouTube? And is our stuff free to go out there?
Yes. So we currently stream all of our meetings on YouTube, and they're posted, saved as a link directly on YouTube. And then current practice is day after a meeting, that link is available on our website.
Okay, but like the employee profiles that you do, when we did this historical 50th anniversary thing that was wonderful, does that live on YouTube? Is it out there?
So the 50th video you're referencing is currently on our Vimeo channel. Mm-hmm. That was kind of our transition of when we were using Vimeo, and then we were using Zoom links for meetings. Over the last, I would say 6 to 8 months, we really transferred to YouTube primarily. Those videos that I was mentioning are only currently living on our social media channels, but we're happy to link them to a YouTube account. The tricky thing is, and what my department is working really hard on, is catering different content for certain platforms. So Instagram is a reel 9:16. Facebook is a horizontal video 16:9. So we're doing 2 versions of one video.
Yeah. I think some of that stuff's evergreen. It can live, you can watch that 50th anniversary 5 years from now. It still makes sense. It's still great. If we roll out, I know it's not very exciting, but if we roll out the trash cans, that's a neat video.
Yeah.
And, let's get that out there.
Yeah.
I think that, and then something, and it may be Taisha's responsibility, but the youth council, do we do interns here too? Do we have an internship program for finance from UNCC? All these smart people down here want to come over here and learn about it and hook them up?
Department specific on internships. So in the next meeting, you'll see some further requests for that. We do it in engineering. We've done it in just department specific, depending on the capacity of that department.
Yeah, hopefully the youth council turns into people who have a real affinity and appreciate the town and come back and never leave us and all that. But maybe the internship program is parallel to the youth council. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Wanted to say great job highlighting employees and tying it in with the National Day, like Veterans Day, like you did with Devin. Then I saw one you posted highlighting Erin and National, Women's Children's Sports Day. So great job on that.
Thank you. Our goal with the department is really humanizing local government and showing the stories and why we're in the roles that we are. And maybe that's an experience we previously had, experience we're currently having, but really hearing those stories and sharing them on our platforms. No comment.
Anything else for Casey?
I just have one quick thing. So who were we using for videography services?
Currently, we use Market Street Studios, and we love the product that they put out, but catered for specific platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and then making it timely where, we have an event on a Saturday, we can quickly edit something on our phone and post it on a Sunday or even a Monday morning. It's quicker to do that in-house.
I've never really known that there was videography. You don't really see a whole lot of that coming through on anything.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. I think really since you've come on board, from a youth council standpoint, the little shorts that you were doing this week, I think the community seeing that is huge. We've never really had that. Nobody really knew youth council.
Yeah.
So I think that's been really good. So kudos on that.
Thank you.
It has been great. And it's growing.
Yeah.
The demands of it are growing. So I think there's an opportunity to explore what that looks like at some point.
Yeah. Oh, they keep me young.
And then
I'm like, what is this new social media platform? What is this? What's the trend now? Like every week it changes. And then by the time I create the video, it's like, oh, well, that's old. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks, guys. But,
Speed of government.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Casey.
Thank you, guys.
I'm not sure who's going to man the controls while James comes down here and does the IT presentation, but maybe we'll get Wally up there.
Mayor, Council, thank you for having me. Just going to run through the information technology department, so buckle up. It's going to be a while. If you turn to page 7 in your booklet, or I'm sorry, tab number 7, you'll see there's not very many changes outside of our continuing education and training. The IT department is comprised of 2 employees. It's myself and Frankie Flores is the information systems director and the technology services specialist. We interact with every department and have very little interaction with the public. Some of the recent projects that we've worked on, Microsoft 365 migration took place last May, involved SharePoint migration and some things we're working on, and as well as moved our authentication partially into the cloud with Entra ID. We also worked with a GPS fleet management software called Samsara, and that helps with route optimization, mostly at Public Works, but it is within each department. We did a Fuel Master and FM Live. We had an on-prem fuel system that we migrated to the cloud. It's given us enhanced reliability with the newer system and cloud-based reporting. And the digital signage is something we've used at the fire department for quite some time, but we've been able to implement it, especially the communications department has really taken it and run as far as getting information about what's going on around the town out to employees. We have one here in the break room and over at Public Works and a few places throughout, and also at our parks, Harrisburg Park in particular. Our new and ongoing initiatives this year mostly are related to security initiatives, cloud migrations, Teams and SharePoint utilization, process improvements within the IT department, and personnel processes throughout the town, onboarding, offboarding, and how we handle inventory and such. We don't have any capital improvement plans or projects this year. Within the last 18 months, we completed a server refresh and a disaster recovery refresh as well. It should last us a couple more years. So. Our security initiatives, Enter ID I mentioned, is our authentication for all of our user access. It's currently in a hybrid situation where we have an on-prem Active Directory server that migrates with the cloud, and it can be a little tedious. So our end goal is to get all of our authentication to go through Microsoft's Enter ID, the newer technology. We'll be implementing a network traffic monitoring tool. It's a security tool that has live updates from a security company that works with federal governments, airports all over the world, and they've got a live database that basically updates and will instantly update our system with any new threats, IP addresses, URLs, anything that's been known to be malicious. So, another thing we're implementing from a security standpoint is two-factor authentication. We've begun this a little bit with the Office 365 rollout. We've used the Microsoft Authenticator app, text messaging, and we're looking at the possibility of getting key fobs for certain things that we'll just have the code that changes every once in a while. We will not be using email as a secondary authentication method. We don't want to use email to authenticate our email. Otherwise, people end up having to use, a personal account or Google or some third-party app. So we're going to kind of leave that off the table. And our end user education is a big thing. Like to keep them apprised of the latest threats and malicious practices that are out there, phishing and the likes. HR held a lunch and learn yesterday on identity protection. So anything that we can do to make people aware of those things and can go a long way to protecting our system. I've always found that end users are a place that security starts. So, cloud migration initiatives with the Microsoft 365 migration, we've begun to migrate department shares, their document repositories up to the cloud. We're about 50% of the way through that process. We're hoping to look into our ability to help enhance our customer-facing forms, whether it's a water sewer application or anything like that. How can we use SharePoint to make that more accessible to folks? And then improving our internal business processes as well. Kind of how can we work with our departments to see what we can put in a single location that everybody has access to. And then in the future, we'll be evaluating the possibility of moving our ERP and financial software up to the cloud. The enterprise resource planning software really is that's our bread and butter as far as information within the town. And what that'll also do is putting that cloud would reduce hardware costs, but we do run into some challenges, as far as how do we back it up, how do we restore it, how does it integrate with our point of service, our point of sale systems, and things like that. So this year, we've been using Stormwind Studios for the last few years. It's an excellent live instructor-led trainings, new things. We've been looking into some AI, type of tool certifications, but we've used it for simple A+ stuff, Microsoft security, all kinds of certification, project management. I completed the project management training for I did the entire course for that last year, and this year we'll be adding the executive education certification. It's a nationally certified local government CIO. So, and beyond that, we will be continuing to roll out the Harrisburg NC.org. .gov domain. We implemented that in May, really went live with it in August, and we've been rolling it out kind of piecemeal, and as things go on, we've been adding it to our business cards and things that park signages and vehicles and things like that. So, and here is a look at our 5-year expenses. It's pretty flat. Gone up about $19,000 over the last 5 years, and with inflation, I think that someone over there has really done a great job making us be a little more efficient with our money. So we've done I think we've done a heck of a job keeping the costs down from that standpoint. So, and with that, I will welcome any questions.
Have you? Have you started looking at moving away from physical devices and moving to appliances off the cloud?
You're talking about physical servers in particular?
Well, so your end users are working from a virtual. There's no longer a need for the device.
I say, well, you still have to have a device of some sort to access it. I've done that in the past. In my previous employer, when we implemented the servers, we had virtual desktops as well. At the time, that was probably 2011 or so, and there were some pretty difficult challenges as far as integrating with hardware, printers, monitors. Even we're a challenge getting multiple monitors. I'm sure they worked through all that. It depends on. We could use something like that maybe for our field workers, where we don't have to have an individual workstation, but everybody doesn't have to work off the same one. That's something I'll certainly look into. That way, everybody can have their own one. But you still have to pay for Windows licensing on that. We'll look at that from a cost standpoint as well. But yeah, I'll certainly take a look at that.
And then the world of printing, and I know in government work it's different, but it's more and more industry is moving away from printing.
Yeah. Given
the idea that you're losing data and classification of data and what's allowed to be shared, what's not allowed to be shared, et cetera. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I feel like I haven't looked closely at our month-to-month print output, but I know it's not very much.
It's only the HR department. Everybody else, Brian has forced to quit printing. So we print budget books and HR documents, and that's pretty much it.
And I sit near the printer so I can eye everyone that
walks Same color.
We moved it as far away from everybody as we possibly could and said, if you want to print, you're printing over there. So no, they really have taken some great steps to reduce that. And, from an efficiency standpoint, you use the technology, and they've really made a great push in finance for us to reduce that usage to begin with. So.
Any other questions for James?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. You're sort of in this cloud on-prem world. When can you get totally out of that on-prem world? Because it's not just the cost of the servers, it's peripheral database management, firewalls, all that stuff that goes along with it. But if you have one application running on-prem, you're kind of in that business. So do you see? Yeah. And then you've got a renewal point coming up at some point where I got to renew all these servers or I got to renew the software. So have you done the math? Hey, by 2026, I'm going to be out of the on-prem business. It's all cloud.
Yeah, well, we're about halfway, a little past halfway through the first fiscal year after the last server refresh. So we've got about 2 years before it normally would be scheduled.
That's my question. Yeah.
To be honest, most of what we have left are a handful of file servers and our big financial software. That will be a process. Things like the budget module, it's a very, very large instance, but other folks are using it. But I really want to work closely with Brian in particular to evaluate how are those things going to work, before we get to that point. But I'm trying to think. We upgraded the operating system and did a massive migration of that. I want to say it was probably October of 2018 because we implemented that in 2004. I think it was June of 2014, and so it's a kind of a later, more secure database standpoint, and we do have the ability to add cloud access to that, but at what point do you stop paying for the hardware? Nobody's writing the software for on-prem anymore. Basically. So that is what we're.
So I think for you, that ticking time bomb needs to be backed up because you have to get in front of this group and get your money a year in advance and spend a year to get off of it and not come up to that 2-year renewal and go, whoops, I still have to do this.
Yeah. And I would hope, the thing you get into subscription based and how many users are you going to have and things like that, it's all stuff we have to look at and find out. But we pay a pretty hefty penny for the subscriptions on the on-prem licensing. Yeah. So my hope is that moving it to the cloud would not be a really, really substantial, probably be a very large one-time sum for the migration itself, because it's a lot of databases. But beyond that, I don't see, generally the cost goes up 18 to 20% per a year. But that's when it was more for the on-prem side. So it's all stuff we will look into and try to hopefully knock out within the next 2 years if it's a viable solution.
Great.
Anything else for James? I am pushing up against the time I promised to get you all out of here. So if nothing else for James, we'll move right along.
Thank you.
Brian, you grab me the clicker there. Thanks, sir. If everyone could flip to tab 1, and I will do some end notes here and open up for questions and then go through the rest of our schedule. But I wanted to, this wasn't in our presentation, it's in your budget books, the general summary item here for these first set. We still have half of the departments to go. So this is just a summary of what we've done so far. The first 4 columns here, where it's under operations, is what I wanted to draw your attention to, because this is really our goal this year. Is, again, we've staffed up, we've asked the community to invest in the community itself and in our staffing and all the things that we do here, and we have plateaued into that. Now it's just about executing. General fund is proposed to go up 2% in operation expenditures for all the folks that you saw here aggregated together, so much lower than what we expect our services to grow and much lower than inflation. Water and sewer fund at 3% and stormwater at -4%. If you add our capital expenditures, again, just for these departments, we still have fire and parks and police and planning and the other folks to go. Total general fund went down -25% in the capital, so that obviously gives you a pretty big expenditure save there. Water and sewer -4%, and stormwater at -3%. So we're really trying to stay operationally, which is what is a compounding cost, right? Operations generally doesn't go backwards very often. Trash isn't going to be any less expensive next year or the year after. Those things tend to compound. Wages tend to compound. We try to look at that operations as our our reliable expenditure, and we're really, our goal is to keep that as flat as we possibly can, but not go backwards on our quality or the services that we provide. The column total next to it really includes those capital expenditures and things like that in there. So those can vary year to year. If we put a big capital expense out, we're just going to have that for 1 year, and we can maybe not have it the next year. Those are a little bit less predictable. We've got more availability to adjust there. If something happens with the economy, we don't have to spend capital, right? We can push things off. We can do things. Operations, economy goes south, we still got to provide water. We still got to treat sewer. We still got to pick up the trash. We got to pave the roads. Police got to show up. EMS got to show up. House catches on fire. Those things are immutable. We have to do them. So that has been our focus, is to make sure that we're well prepared on operations, that we're being efficient, we're being good stewards of the public trust. And I think we're doing a really good job of this. I'm proud of our staff. This is not something, because of our growth rates, that we've done every year. We've typically had to expand and try to just really keep up. But we are really getting at that cruising altitude where it's incremental change. And we challenged them this year to provide their own budgets under that 4%. That was difficult exercise for everyone, but they took it like champs, and we've come out with an excellent budget. I think you'll be just as impressed when we get to our next meeting. Before we go on to the schedule and then back to the mayor, any questions that we left off? All right, so we see here are 6 dates and 5 columns. We have now completed the first 2. We've had kind of our planning retreat, the council retreat. Tonight of draft 1 budget for the first half of our departments. The next meeting will be there on the 26th, where we'll see fire, police, planning, administration, council's budget, and finance. Did I miss anybody? Parks. And parks. As soon as we complete that, we will then send out homework assignments to everybody here, and we'll kind of go through all these capital projects and policies and anything that we didn't mention that you want to see, and come back on that March 20th with a draft 2 budget where we have revenues and fees and a real framework of the manager's recommended budget to make sure that we've heard you, that we've understood the priorities. And if there aren't major changes after that, we will roll that right into the first public hearing on April 14th, where we will present the manager's recommended budget at that meeting, wait a month for public comment, present it again at May 12th, and have adoption at that May meeting. That concludes our portion of the meeting for this evening. Mayor, back to you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to all of our department heads that presented tonight. Rob, I did want to check back on action items and make sure we didn't miss anything from this meeting to carry over. I just had a couple things. The waste collection fee, I know they were asking how does that incorporate into the revenue versus cost. Difference between the state-owned roads and town-owned on the GIS pavement management system. Consider replacements now versus later because of inflation. I think that was particularly on vehicles. And then I had employee recognition via the communication department and more council involvement. Was there anything else that I did not get?
We had a request on showing number of employees versus other towns, which we'll have that as part of this budget as well. The request to look at review up processes in our review, transferring things over to YouTube channel that we have on Vimeo and that fits the formatting, as well as some questions about maybe a global internship program rather than department by department, and several questions on kind of our cloud-based computing, off-prem versus on-prem, device versus no device items. So, and that was all I had.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Before we dismiss, we do have 3 members of the community here. Thank you for sitting through our meeting with us, and wanted to open it up if there were any questions or comments that you would like to make. And as usual, just you can walk up to the podium and state your name and address for the record if anybody has anything tonight.
I've got one quick thing.
You can walk up. Just that name and address for the record. Thanks, Mark.
My name is Mark Monroe. I live at 6751.
I'm sorry, speaking.
I live at 6751 River Hills Drive in Harrisburg, 28075. First off, Mayor and Council, thank you for your long hours and extra work. I know this is, nobody likes being up here at 9 o'clock, so this is great, so thank you. I just have one thing that I'm a little unclear on and maybe a little concerned about. I did some quick map work on my phone, and I noticed that Farmington is above Cabarrus Woods. It looks like Holcomb Acres is below Cabarrus Woods. Cabarrus Woods is on the county line between Mecklenburg and Cabarrus, but it's in the Cabarrus County. But it looks like Cabarrus Woods is not in the town of Harrisburg. So I'm a little concerned that Harrisburg taxes and revenues are going to doing repair and maintenance in a county area. It seems to me like the county ought to be doing that, and the city should not be doing that. I mean, I don't know that we're in the business of providing taxpayer maintenance and work outside of the city. So I don't know if that needs to have a discussion. If we're doing that, perhaps that subdivision needs to be annexed into the city so that they are then eligible for city support and work and maintenance and sewer, or perhaps that needs to be offloaded to Cabarrus County. Not sure how that happened, but there's probably a story there, but it's probably worth having a discussion since it's part of the budget.
Yeah, I can answer that. And that's not unique. It's not unique in Harrisburg, nor throughout the state of North Carolina, where we have donut holes within the town. Cabarrus Woods is one of those. We have several other neighborhoods in town that it's the same thing. We don't spend tax dollars out there, and I do want to make that clear. And we can't spend tax dollars in those locations. But those are customers for utilities. So we're the utility provider, just like Duke is, right? Duke's not a town, but they're a utility provider. We are a town and a utility provider. So we don't do anything with the street. We don't do anything as far as our tax dollars when it comes to infrastructure in those locations. What that project was, it's a water and sewer, and they are water and sewer customers of ours. So we provide them water and sewer services, and we have to maintain their water and sewer lines and so on and so forth. But I will say that there is a bit of an issue throughout the state, and again, Harrisburg isn't unique to this, whereas we do provide police and fire and park services and other things to Harrisburg people who aren't in the town limits, right? So we have 22,500-ish population that I showed tonight. We serve, close to 29,000 people. So, we have thousands of folks that don't live in town who do get emergency services, deputies, fire, EMS, those types of things. What they don't get are the tax-paying things, the environmental services, so trash and leaf, but they do get a bit of a benefit. I agree with you. I've said that here several times. The council has tried to address that, at least like in our parks and athletics, with out-of-town residents pay a higher fee. On water and sewer, out-of-town resident or out-of-town customers pay a higher rate, and that's all kind of controlled by the legislature. There is no ability for the town to forcibly annex areas, even if we wanted to. The legislature does not allow that, even if you had wanted to. So, the situation will remain throughout the state where you do have these donut holes, but it's not on infrastructure. It's not on spending we can choose. It's the spending that we don't choose, which is we have a fire department. If they're the closest one to show up and somebody outside of the town catches on fire, we're showing up. Somebody has a heart attack, we're showing up. Somebody has a crime happen in Cabarrus Woods, our deputies are showing up. And there's no real way for us to avoid that, because the only other answer would be don't show up to somebody that needs help. And that's always going to happen.
That's an interesting, it's an interesting perspective. I guess if we're spending money for the maintenance of their water lines and they do not pay enough to cover that, then the taxpayers pick up the difference. I mean, the city's money picks up the difference, correct?
No.
I mean, how does it get paid for?
Only ratepayers pay for water and sewer projects. We don't spend property tax dollars on water and sewer. So it could be spread across the entire customer base. So it might be that some money from folks or customers in and out of the town might be subsidizing a project in Cabarrus Woods this year, and then they don't get anything for 20 years, and they're subsidizing Old Harrisburg for several years, and then they don't get anything, and we're subsidizing Middleton for a few years, and then it just that's the way it cut. You know, all of the rates, all of the water bills collected go into maintaining the entire water system, and you know, there are some winners and losers on that depending on when they were brought on board. For instance, like our new customers in, let's say, Holcomb, right? We're not spending any money in Holcomb's lines for a long time. However, they still have a component of their rate that's paying for upkeep and maintenance of the whole system, even though Holcomb's lines aren't the ones being worked on now. So it's just really spread across the entire customer base, but it's not spread across the entire resident, if there's a distinction to be made there. Yep.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody else?
Jim Eskew, 8010 Combe Court, or Wickham Court. I lived there 10 years. Don't know how to pronounce it. Just a point of clarification, looking for, well, maybe you can answer Rob or maybe Janet on this item that came up about digitization of records. Would that include making them publicly accessible and or searchable?
Janet, do you want to answer that? I think that is already available, so I don't want to misspeak.
The minutes are already available like that now. And there's a link on our website to find them. Some of the things could not be made public, personnel records, things like that could not be. So it would just depend on which record it would be. Some would be public, some would not.
Right, but we're talking about the agenda packets going back to like 1973. Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
Well, currently everything that's required to be out there is out there, and anything else we have. But I don't know that we would make that'd be a lot.
So,
you can request it.
Well, you can, you can request it,
access it, but
you can certainly do that.
But I would think, ideally, I mean, we haven't gone into what vendors can do for us on this, but ideally, if it's physically possible, and if it isn't so cumbersome, that's the ideal scenario, right? You have them available electronically and searchable, and so on and so forth. It's easier for us to have it out there than to constantly fill public record requests.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is the first Wally Wallace, but we're so glad you could make it with us this evening. Is there any other business that we need to discuss before we adjourn tonight? Great. Thank you so much for all being here, and the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you guys back on February 26th.